I hereby call to order the board training of the Board of Trustees of the East Central Independent School District being held on December 11th, 2025, beginning at 5 p.m. to order. Madam Secretary, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Ginger Friesenhunt, David Santos, Randall Gerhardt,
Here.
James Mulkey, Mayor Brazil is here, Emilia Carrasco, Monique Braces.
Here. Thank you. Next, we have the prayer and the pledge.
Yeah, Mr. McKay.
Yes, sir. May your fire heads, please. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just continue to thank you for the many blessings. Lord, we just ask that you provide a hedge of protection around our students and our staff, Lord, and particularly as we launch into the winter break. Lord, we just ask that you continue to provide wisdom and guidance to this team, Lord, and the work that we do that's so important to this community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Stand for the pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I'm sure there's not any public comments, so we're just going to move to item 5, which is the SGS Board Pathway Training.
Yeah, so you have, trustees, in your miscellaneous packet, a copy of the slide deck, as well as it'll be projected on the screen as always. I'll turn it over to Dane and the team to go ahead and get it started.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. Since it's been a minute since we were last here with you, we have a little bit of a connection that we want to start with. Just to reorient everyone who we are and what we're doing. And then we'll go through the agenda and start the training. So with that, and I'll go first so there's no pressure, but the question we have for you is, when you think about if holding yourself accountable means setting an expectation and following up regularly to ensure that you meet that expectation, can you share an example from your personal or professional life when you did this well and why you thought, what was it? What did you do to kind of keep yourself on track? Why do you think you were successful at it? And so the example I like to use, it's a personal example. But a couple of years ago, I set personal goals at the start of the year. I was never a resolutions person or anything like that. But I made myself a little spreadsheet. And I had 4 things I had to do every single month to make sure that I connected with my family, which sometimes is harder than you think. I had to do something with friends. I had to do something like professional networking, not necessarily connected to my actual work. And then I had to do something personal for myself, something I wouldn't normally do. And so having the spreadsheet helped me keep on track. Every month I would check the little boxes and I could see my progress. I had the formatting turn green and that kind of stuff. I even, for the networking, created a list of people I might want to network with, so that when it was time to schedule something, I had a place that I could go and see those kinds of things. So that's an example of how I held myself accountable for that. First year, say like 10 out of 12 months I hit. This year's December, I'm on track to hit every month.
So, wow, that's good.
So do you have any examples, either personally or professionally, where you held yourself accountable to a particular goal, and why were you successful? And that's for Laura and Paul too.
Well, I'll just add one thing to what you said. Similarly, made some personal goals a few years ago. These were a little bit more specific to just overall wellness. And in addition to calendaring, setting time, blocking out time to commit to set activity, and then monitoring and tracking that, added an accountability group who had similar goals for themselves. And so every single day, there's a check-in that involves providing evidence that I followed through with my goal today, and the ability to see whether the others did. And from week to week, there might be a little bit of an incentive that for those that don't meet their goals this week, you know, someone's responsible for buying lunch or whatever. So just adding in an accountability mechanism in addition to holding myself accountable.
Thank you.
I set a goal for myself to try to stay more cognizant of the calendar and activities around the district, and to try to reach out to my fellow board members and attend things. This month I'm not doing very well. It's a hard month for me. But anyways, it was better in October and November, and I hope after the new year I'll be able to pick back up again.
And what do you do to make sure you're successful? Do you track it, or do you?
I just track it myself on my calendar, just try to circle things and make lists of things that I've attended, and put, little alarms on my phone to call and reach out and see what everybody's doing, so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What community good?
And that, Lord, I was just talking a little while ago about so many different, I won't call them meetings, I'll just say opportunities to connect. That, simultaneously, like I just came out of a meeting, you can hear, I actually had another scheduled meeting that I knew that this was scheduled, so, I couldn't do that. It's not that I didn't want to try to do those things, but I know you can only multitask so much, and the goal, if you're gonna have a goal, the goal is to meet it. And so I like what you said. When I was working in hospital, I had I had a cell phone, I had a beeper, I had BlackBerry, I had all of these different things that you had to always have to be connected to. And even one day I was a hospital supervisor, and one of the security guards had a situation and wanted me to even take his walkie-talkie away. Are you kidding? But trying to juggle all of those things. And again, the goal is to meet the goal. So I found myself having all of these different calendars or whatever. And so now at home, I've been, of course, been retired, but no less busy. So trying to meet those goals, looking at, one calendar, we have like one giant calendar that everybody has to look at. And now that we're getting older, I can't remember and to remind as often as I do, which, kind of drives me nuts when people don't remember, and then you got to remind them, and then you have to remind them to remind them, and then you forgot that you forgot to remind them, and so then you go, and it's not on this calendar, that kind of stuff. Again, trying to meet the goal. So I don't know. I think I do relatively well with all of the things that kind of go on, because I get up early in the morning and I think through my day. I have to do that. And so when I do that, and then I include who may be in my day, whether they want to know about it or not, and then try to help them in okay, so that at the end of my day, my blood pressure won't be up and I can sleep well, and I don't apologize for going to bed early or whatever. It can wait until morning unless the house is on fire, so.
And that hasn't happened yet?
That's right. That's right.
No, but I heard you, so it sounds like you have to prioritize, break it down into smaller manageable pieces, thinking about just the day by itself and maintaining focus on the goal. I don't envy you. So many competing commitments.
I'm sorry?
I said I don't envy you all the competing commitments.
So me at work, I have a small group of people. There's four to five of us. And I depend heavily on my calendar to remind me at work on my computer what to do, because we can't carry cell phones with us and stuff. So if it's not there, it has to be written down on a piece of paper. So I got a notepad that says things to do today. And you can put them on that paper in whatever order you choose for everybody in my shop.
Okay.
So we use that paper a lot just to figure out what we're doing. But then working IT, you get tickets all day long. So your priorities change daily, and you can't actually schedule everything. So, and being I'm in charge, I have to go to all the crazy meetings that nobody else wants to go to, and I need to go to make sure things are running right with the people we service too. So that's how I try to keep track of my work schedule. At home, I let my wife take care of that. She tells me what to do
You say yes.
and where to be.
It holds you accountable.
Yeah, we're going on vacation. Okay, just tell me where.
I kind of keep vacillating between a professional one and a personal, so I'll use a professional one. It was a few years back, our chief instructional officer had gotten a superintendency job, had left, and so at that time, Mr. Toscano, was including me in on a lot more of the curriculum side. It was late March, early April. He invited me along with some of the team from the curriculum department to go to another district to really talk about CCMR accountability. And we learned a lot of things, and when we stepped out, we got with the people who were overseeing it at that time and found out we were well below where we should have been at that time, knowing where we were at. And so at that moment, he tasked me and said, "You need to take responsibility of this and need to start seeing what we can do." At that point, we formulated a team. We came up with our strategy. We came up with our targeted goals that we were going to have week over week. Our cadence of accountability, we would come together, who was responsible for what our next steps were. And then from that point, when we met every week, it was how do we do our steps? What evidence do we have of impact that it had? What adjustments do we need to make for next week? And then we continued that process, and we went from a really, really low number to, we went from 23% to 89% by the time we hit May, which was pretty remarkable. It was a team effort to really get that all done. But I think when I think about what we learned through that was that cadence, having other people that are all responsible and know that they're shared ownership and getting that process done. It can't be just one person. So that's a professional one.
That's a great example. Do you guys have anything you would like to share?
I think mine's also, I have a few, but going to like wellness at the beginning of this year, I had decided I wanted to do something, like add different kinds of workouts to my routine. And so my friend and I decided to try hot yoga.
All right.
And so having the friend with me is what has kept me accountable, because now we're like, you going tonight? Are you going tonight? And then it's also an opportunity that we can like chat. So it's helped. And we try to do 4 times a week, at least twice. And so we're getting close to like our 100th class.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
Where's an overachiever? That's a lot, 4 times a week. Hot yoga too.
Well, we liked it, and so
Yeah.
it helps, And so after the newness wore off, what helped was having her
Yeah.
and me tell each other, "Hey, you didn't come to Monday. Are we going to Tuesday? Are we going to go Wednesday?" So
That's a good example.
I know hot yoga is weird, but we really like it.
Well, you inspired me to recall my effort to run a marathon 20 years ago. And I had never run a marathon before, but I had been a short distance runner, just for fun. And I took a course, and the course was a training over 6 months, but the important part of it was I had made a personal commitment to my friends and my family that I was going to do this. And then I had this cohort of people that I was working with, and they put us in teams of people who had similar skills. That team and I bonded over 6 months. And I'll never forget, there was a very cold and rainy day on Saturday, and I think we were at the 20-mile length that we were supposed to run that day. And we all got out to the lakefront in New Orleans. The wind is blowing the waters over the break wall, and we are running along that break wall. We're 10 miles out, 10 miles back in the rain. When I finished that, I got in the car, I couldn't even move. But it was the way to assure the commitment to execute on the plan was to announce it publicly to people, and announce it, and then form a group that reinforced it and held me accountable for showing up, each time. So, and we were part of a team in a way, because we were working together for 6 months.
And did you run the marathon?
We did.
Have
And
you
then-
done one since?
After 3 marathons, I injured my knee, and then I said, that's the end of running for me, so I haven't run since. I gotta go get some knee surgery in a month too. But anyway.
All right. thank you for thinking of your examples, either personal or professional, and what made you successful. Obviously, it was a strategic question, because today we're gonna be talking about evaluating improving student outcomes. We're gonna be talking about, at least for SGS, what's called the annual school planning process. We introduced it when we were here last time, but we're gonna dig into that a little bit more, because it's that time of year, and it's what you've just been doing with the team. We're not gonna spend more than a minute probably talking about how the teams self-assess themselves on the rubric for SGS in terms of where they are in implementation, but I did share that with you through Cambry ahead of time, so you can take a look at that, and just kind of see. And then the last thing that we did do ahead of time, which is awesome, I appreciate it, is the board self-assessment results. So we'll look to see how we did this time compared to where we were at the start of the year. Okay? That's a lot for the time that we have designated. So we will persevere. Okay, we shared this last time, and these are just some norms for us to think about for this evening in terms of conversations, because even though it's a required training, we want it to be very participatory. We're gonna have a lot of conversations about not just what the practice looks like, but what it looks like specifically here in East Central. So are there any of these that you want to make sure to lift up or focus on for tonight? I know they're all important. All of them? Okay. What I will say is, given the topics today, 3 and 4 will be particularly helpful to think about in terms of, embracing candor, having honest discussions, being vulnerable, and then, talking through things and figuring out how we're going to work together and move together as a team. This is just to kind of reorient everyone to what's supposed to be the pathway this year. It's a year-long process with us. We were here the first quarter, and that was really high-level overview of what to expect and what are the key practices in SGS. That's also when we introduced the self-assessment to the board. Quarter 2 is where we are now, which is why our focus now is around that annual school planning. And then because Cambry shared with me, the majority of the board needed to do the ISO training again, that pairs really well with the SGS topics. And so that's why we're doing that tonight. When we come back in quarter 3, that's when we will do some more work or get into work related to vision, mission, values, and the theory of action, some of which you started last year with Duncan and the team, but we'll see where we can strengthen that possibly. And then we'll also have more robust conversation related to student access and enrollment, and we'll take that self-assessment again and see where the board's at that point. In terms of evidence of success, this might be a little bit harder to see. If you look at quarter 2, these are things that the team has to have in terms of deliverables for TEA as an SGS district. And so that's why if you look under quarter 2, all the check marks, so many of the check marks are there, because those are things that the agency expects administration to bring to the board. Things like the North Star Goal, things like the quality seats analysis. And so that's why we'll be talking about those pieces this evening. And then the other thing that I thought it might be helpful for you guys to see one more time before we get started is, we always talk about the 4 essential actions in SGS. And so these are the 4 essential actions that you see here. It's first and foremost setting a North Star goal and conducting an annual school planning process. That's where we're going to spend most of our time tonight, because it's that time of year. That's when this is when that happens. The second piece is creating, expanding, and replicating high quality, high demand school models. We'll touch on how those pieces are connected in the annual school planning process. And then you can see kind of where we're going. When we come back in the 3rd quarter, that's when we'll get to the 3rd essential action, which is around empowering families through school choice and access supports. And then towards the end of the year, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about developing collaborative and sustainable central office structures to be able to sustain the work long term. Any questions about those pieces or what you might remember from last time that maybe has been hanging out in your mind that you'd like to talk about before we get started? All right, then we are going to jump in. to evaluating and improving student outcomes. And I was trying to take as much time as I could there to make sure that Emilio had a chance to get here.
Just slip in short, you have to know
So,
it.
yes. So what I do want to say, just as a kind of a caveat is, evaluating and improving student outcomes is a TEA training that we all have to be trained to be able to provide to boards. And the way they do that, they have this expectation that it's almost like you're proctoring a test. Like, you're gonna read the script and you're gonna ask questions specifically and these kinds of things. We're not gonna be so rigid with you tonight, but we are gonna try to, stick to what the expectation is, just given that it's a required board training. And these are also, for the majority of our time this evening, our TEA slides also. And so if you've done this before, they might look familiar, but we'll go through it together. I'll also say, I'm gonna skip where I can, because it is a lot of slides, but we wanted to make sure that you had slides as a resource in case you want to do deeper, learn a little bit more, come back to things. That's also why there's an appendix. In case there are things that we come up tonight, we wanted to have some resources ready, but those are optional. So just want to put that out there because it's a lot of
The
slides.
appendix is in here?
The appendix should be
The
Cambry
appendix
said
is-
she was gonna.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I see.
So, okay. So, let's start with this question, and this is really, there are no wrong answers. This is really to kind of prime the pump. So, why does the board need to focus on evaluating and improving student outcomes? Share whatever comes to mind. And like I said, it's just to warm us up. You know it's important.
Well, we want our students to do good first and foremost, so they're good, productive citizens. But also it makes us, lets the community know that we're doing our job, doing a good job.
We need to know where we're at so we can, our expectations can be, we can see if our expectations are being met or if they need to be addressed.
Right.
So,
And I think one of the reasons for asking this question is, in my experience, boards can get lost in the other work that needs to be done, right? And it's easy to focus on the budget. Sometimes it's not. But it's easier or easy to focus on the budget or a personnel issue or, a lot of operational things as opposed to student outcomes. And so I think it's very important to get the kind of answer from board members that student outcomes is like our reason for being. All those other things are important. They are necessary to achieve that. But a lot of times boards lose sight of this. And I don't know if you've had exposure to this, but one of the things in Lone Star governance that is a board training program that the state provides, they actually get into saying boards need to spend a certain percentage of time on this because sometimes they lose track of this. So it's while it seems kind of obvious, this is what we should be focused on. A lot of times people get lost because of other, important things, but then they lose sight of this. And it's also, I think it's harder, in my experience, it's harder to track student outcomes and how you can improve student outcomes. And districts struggle with that, so people tend not to want to talk about things that they struggle with. But I think it's important for the board to struggle with the district or, progress with the district. In this case, we're progressing with the district and making sure you're clued in to what the student outcome goals are, whether you're making progress on that, and asking questions about that. And that's kind of what we're trying to reinforce with this training that we're going through here.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's what I was thinking. I'm stuck in that question. What kind of a question is that?
Right.
We're in that, isn't this the business that we're in? But I've been on the board for a few years, and been on a few more than me. But we weren't challenged to do this back in the day, or anything. And I can appreciate you saying you can kind of get lost or whatever. And one of the things you can sort of measure or evaluate is what opportunities you do have when we go and have the board trainings and stuff. You can start to see where they're trying to gear us, even though we don't necessarily like some of the stuff, but that it's necessary, and have a plan to be able to actually accomplish what is required of you. And so, more and more, we started to see this. We started to look at more with early childhood education and special needs children, that kind of thing. Can't
Yep.
think of the right word I want.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Focusing on some of those different things, whereas before, when I first started getting in, they were nice workshops, and you could have maybe some discussion, but I can certainly see how, with all of the expectations as boards, this is really serious business. It's nice to serve on a board or whatever, but we are accountable and responsible for some major stuff. And so, yeah, okay, it is a real question, okay.
Yes. Well, and I would add, I think it's really special when you can do this training together and have the conversations as a team. Because although it's a required training, oftentimes people do that just based on when it permits in their schedule, and they do that through service centers and things like that. So I think that's the other thing that makes this opportunity unique.
I'd like to add, 2 years ago, we did this training for those that were at that training. The board ended the training really focused on trying to create some long-range student outcome goals, because they wanted to make sure, the board wanted to make sure that we could answer this question with some direction given to the superintendent and the educators in the system. And subsequently, by developing those long-range goals, it signaled immediately, and I say this to say, sometimes serving as a board member, you feel like, you get busy doing a lot of things, but really how important is it? It's the tail that wags the dog, because Mr. McKay and I and all of our executive team, our principals and our teachers will say they know what the long-range goals are, and in 2 years, it has completely transformed our focus and energy, all the way to now board meetings, obviously every month, we lead with a board goals update. And we communicate publicly with the board about the progress we're making, but more importantly, what's tracking, what's not tracking, what we're doing about it. So this accountability piece, this idea about professing to the public what you're going to do. We're going to run a marathon, we're going to achieve these long-range goals. You go to the board landing page, that's what's there. So the organization now knows the board's focused on improving student outcomes above all the things they're responsible for.
Yeah.
Your superintendent knows, there's a lot, we got a lot of things that we need to fix and work on and manage and ensure are being executed, but it's all in service of this. And this is the shiniest of all objects that we will be distracted by, because the board has codified it based on this training. That's why the board needs to focus on evaluating and improving student outcomes. It is our core business. Like you said, Ms. Dale, this is what we exist for. This is why
I'll
we're
just
here.
add very quickly, I have never seen so many experts and other thinking outside the box and all of that being brought to us, where we can actually hear and kind of learn alongside, if you will, and that kind of thing. So, and I know all of that hard work, all of that coordinating and all of those things, you know, slow and steady makes the race. Yeah, we didn't necessarily become the A's of overnight, but look at the direction that we're going and we're achieving it, and that's the whole thing. So why focus on this is so that we can meet that goal.
It's like an inspiring conversation, and now I gotta talk very briefly about the requirements. So what I will say, we're not gonna read this slide. It's what's in administrative code about the expectations for board development. One of which, and I would say arguably one of the most important, is evaluate improving student outcomes. So it just tells you that it's required every 2 years. It's supposed to be a minimum of 3 hours. And then if you read here what's in bold, I feel like those are the more important statements, because there needs to be instruction in school board behaviors correlated with improving student outcomes and emphasis on all the things. Instruction in progress monitoring practices to improve student outcomes. And then that last piece that's bolded, instruction in state accountability with the emphasis on TEKS. And so tonight, those are the things we're going to be talking about, is what is the accountability system, what is STAR, what are the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, how does it correlate to the test, things like that. And then we'll spend a good amount of time in the board behaviors that's referenced here in terms of the goal setting and the progress monitoring. So this is just pointing to, it's an administrative code required every 2 years. This next piece, just going to touch on it, and it is aligned to what we've talked about before, which is the framework for school board development. Has 5 pillars, each of which outline really the responsibilities of trustees in service of each of those pillars. And so the training today, if you kind of look at how these are named, are most closely connected to the top 3. So vision and goals, progress and accountability, and systems and processes. The board sets what those goals are for the district, ensures that you're monitoring progress, you're holding the district accountable, and you have strong systems and processes for doing that. All right. I've already said what the objective is, so I'm going to skip that. And then if you just think about, what's that again? Oversight of academic achievement. So this just talks about the board's responsibility, and some probing questions there are, what does oversight of academic achievement and strategic leadership look like in our district? As well as, how do we know that we are maximizing student performance? For time purposes, we're gonna dig into that a little bit later, but these are kind of the overarching questions that are gonna guide us through the training, okay? So, because you have it in front of you, it's gonna be hard for me to ask you this question because the answers are here on right. But the question is supposed to be, what will an education from our school district provide to students? And you touched on it a few minutes ago as well. But it is that, we want students to graduate, we want them to become engaged citizens, we want them to be productive members of society. So it's good we have our cheat sheet. And this is a real question, how do we know that our system is producing productive and engaged graduates? And again, no wrong answers. This is, again, just to sort of warm us up in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So how do we know?
Well, just one thing I was just, this is a little, I know there are a lot of probably different answers, but just one of the things that I like that we do is we check with those graduates. We'll check in with them or invite them to maybe come back or send, the school something that, that kind of thing. And so you kind of, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure how, I know we measure and check on students. I've forgotten how long we do that, even if after they graduate, do we do that, or do I have that mixed up? I couldn't remember. It seemed to me like we had done something like that before when we were looking at, okay, maybe not. But at any rate, I know we do.
No, I mean, part of your CCMR data is, what's happening after graduation so that you can find out if they're,
Yeah, and
finishing
it might have been a
junior year.
workshop that I went to that heard that, but anyway, I thought that's great because they can come back or they can even send information about how they're doing, because if the goal is to make them productive citizens, how will you know how that's working if we don't kind of, that's just one part. I know our responsibility is while they're here to make sure that they get to that point, to graduate, but that's just one thing I just thought of under that.
Yeah. I think staff reports to us where they are throughout the year as far as heading towards our graduation goals and what that looks like and what they're trying, what goal they're trying to hit. And they report that to us and tell us where they're at and how many they have as far as being successful, how many they are trying to get to a certain point. And by that, I think that proves, that they are producing productive and engaged graduates by working with those numbers and reporting those to us.
Do you guys have a strong alumni base or a way that you keep track, or is it a pretty engaged group of folks?
Yeah, in terms of, I think there's some opportunity to kind of know what happens beyond high school, right? So we're getting pretty good at knowing what happens when kids immediately leave us with regard to how many earned industry certifications, how many were military ready, career ready, and even college ready, how many enrolled in college. We're not yet quite where we could be with regard to, are they finishing in
Right.
4 years, what percentage,
Did they feel prepared?
And then you look at the Texas workforce data, how many of them are, employed in high demand work sectors. But, what Mo was referring to is, of the long range goals, obviously they're inclusive of CCMR, the number of graduates who have reached one or more of those indicators, the percentage of graduates who qualified as college ready, which is different than just CCMR, and obviously college enrollment, industry certifications earned, and knowing where we are at any point in time, and then establishing strategies for how we're going to increase all of those things as a result of those long-range goals. And again, reporting progress, espousing what those outcomes are going to be from this to this year, for example, and then reporting progress all along the way in real time, with most importantly, what we're doing about it if the trend line isn't tracking. And so from that standpoint, the board hopefully will begin to have confidence that they know how to answer this question with some specificity and or where to get evidence to that end that they could share publicly and feel comfortable and confident communicating.
And of course, CAST is a really great example. I know it's a small example of all of it, but when they leave and have gotten their certifications or whatever, and actually have an opportunity to go straight into the workforce and or more, get extended education, if you will, have it that extends and that kind of thing. And so we get to see that, and the graduation of those students, I just love it because they're really getting ready to just get out there, and they have the confidence, obviously, because they work with business community and along with the regular school staff, and you believe that they're ready because you can actually just kind of see that they're ready. And I'm not saying you can't see that with the rest of the kids that graduate, but I'm just saying that is set apart to actually guide them right into a particular field or whatever that they are readying themselves for.
What's depending on the board's interaction, with folks who do workforce development or different sectors of the industry, or just on the district partnerships, things like that. You might also be able to get some informal feedback that way as well. Okay, secondary question, how do we know that we're playing a strategic role in that process? You've talked a little bit about being able to set the goals and monitor the progress towards some of those related to the graduation rates and CCMR and things like that, but is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about how do we know that we're playing a strategic role?
I guess in discussion, basically, when we get, they report to us, we're able to ask questions, and so in discussion, if we have any questions or something doesn't look right, or, you know, we're concerned, we're able to address that at that time. And if they don't have the answer for us, then they'll get it back to us. But if we're curious why something does not look right or doesn't sit well with us, then we're able to ask about that at that time.
And we're knowing at a time where we can do something to make a difference as opposed to finding out after they
Yes.
graduate.
That's
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's what I had reference to superintendent bringing in all these various, you know, experts to work alongside, coaches, all of the things that's needed to be able to, because it's every student, every day, every second of every day. And so that takes a lot. But we are presented with the information to be able to look at whether we understand all of it or not. But our goal is to make sure that we're on the right track and that the planning and all the things that is to make the goal of them being productive students and, you know, that kind of thing. So
I think too, we have an environment where we're able to ask questions freely, you know what I mean? And if after we get a report, whether it be at a meeting or whatnot, we have the environment that we're able to ask a question like, why does this look like this? And what are we doing, you know? So it's we have a very open opportunity to ask questions like that. So.
You know, as a board, also very attentive to the correlation between student attendance and student discipline as it relates to out-of-class time consequences, how that correlates with student outcomes. And a couple of years ago, they were noticing some trends. You know, kids were being removed from class quite a bit because of behavior. There was some lagging attendance and still hadn't, you know, rebounded post-COVID. And they asked a lot of questions about why this is not okay. Like, we've got to figure this out. And one of the things that they landed on was cell phones seem to be connected to a lot of these issues, either directly or indirectly. This is before the recent legislation. They directed me to commission a community focus group to study the issue in the interest of regaining instructional time to affect student outcomes academically. And we did that. We spent all of one spring, and the community reported back to the board, we need to get cell phones out of our kids' hands. After learning what child psychologists were saying, after learning what education researchers were saying, after looking at our own data, they had enough information to say, we're going to refine our local guidelines for cell phones in this school district because we've got to get a hold of more instructional time that we're losing because, in part, cell phones. So I say that just to remind this board, before you got back on, you guys have played strategic role in ensuring that you're using the information you're getting to ask enough questions to then help us identify opportunities and then set in direction to say, hey, this ain't okay.
Right.
Mr. Superintendent, y'all need to figure this out. The community has spoken. And we see clearly we got an opportunity here to make progress. And
Agreed.
that along with the e-hall pass, you know, we had a lot of kids out of class, a lot of issues happening between class exchange and during unstructured times, and so that was another solution to make progress on this that the board initiated.
Yes.
That's a great example.
Mhm.
I'm glad Josh, so something
Something you didn't mention was the efforts in keeping the teachers in the classroom too, because students learn much better when they have one teacher all the time, not temporary teachers. And nothing against temporary teachers, but some of them aren't as good.
Yeah.
As having that one teacher all the time. And I'm seeing this from the outside because I'm new again. And I think that's important, having that teacher there all the time.
Yeah, so that was another example, thanks for bringing that up, where the board said, we understand you have a sub-fill rate challenge, but we don't want to incentivize subs in the classroom. A lot of districts were increasing daily sub-rate rates, and said, no, we want to incentivize our teachers to be here more frequently. How can we build structures and systems and embed them in a way that incentivizes our teachers to, you know, reduce discretionary absences, because we love subs, but we don't, that's not the solution.
Right.
So let's not put our eggs in that basket, and let's figure out how to incentivize our staff to be here. So we've got several programs now that we've rolled out for a couple of years now that offer some financial incentives for staff to you know, be more mindful about how they manage their calendars so that they can manage life and be in the classroom.
Has that made a difference?
It's made a huge difference.
Yes.
They're also in the process of reviewing a policy that will eliminate dock time. Any employee moves into dock, their status is under review.
Oh, wow.
No dock time.
Right.
So that's the next area of opportunity that the board is reviewing to consider
Right.
how they can have a direct role in making sure that we're guaranteeing all of the variables that give students the best opportunity to have the most learning outcomes. The board is looking for those opportunities at the governance level and making policy changes accordingly, or even administrative regulation changes that will improve the conditions. These are recent examples.
That's huge.
It is
Yeah.
huge.
Mhm.
But
And not a lot of boards are thinking about it like that.
all that to say, the board has been playing an increasingly strategic role
Okay, yeah.
in ensuring that we're producing productive and engaged graduates,
Yeah.
all stemming from an unrelenting focus on student outcomes.
That's sure.
Okay. The next slide, you've seen this before, because we talked about it when we came at the start of the year. So we're not gonna spend a ton of time here, other than to just sort of reorient everyone to what the state's goal is. So, the state's vision is that every child is prepared for success in college, career, or military. And the state's goal for post-secondary attainment is by 2030, that 60% of Texans will have a degree, certificate, or other post-secondary credential of value. We talked, I don't know, I remember talking about that last time, but we also showed you this graph last time in terms of, so where are we? And it's 36% out of that 60% goal is where we are right now, at least based on, it's too small for me to see. Class of 2015 is when that was last captured. So the headline there is, we have a lot of work to do to be able to meet the state's goal of 60% of every child being prepared for success in college, a career, or the military.
If you leave that up for a second, just for the board's reference, you see some familiar metrics, right? Third grade reading, third grade math. Fifth grade's not there, that's one of our milestones so that we can get to that eighth grade reading and math. We don't want to lose sight of how important it is to sustain what we've accomplished in third grade. In fifth grade, with literacy and numeracy, CCMR, college enrollment or college readiness, these are all reflected in your 5 board milestone or long-range goals. So when the board decided to come up with student outcome goals, they went through a long exercise of figuring out what was upstream enough and landed on a reflection of what they learned in ISD training. Just wanted to really just point that out to the board.
And what
Make
you'll
that connection.
hear as a theme this evening is post-secondary success. Post-secondary success, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to make sure that we have graduates, engaged citizens, productive citizens, things like that. So in order to see how we're doing, we have to have a way to measure that. We have to have a way to see, real-time comparisons of how kids are doing compared to the state, compared to the districts that are like us, things like that. So one question I'm curious to know is, how many of you guys have been to the texasschools.gov website? Okay, we'll talk about it.
I might have it once or twice, but I don't
Okay.
recall.
Well, you have to have kind of specific reason to go look, but
Yeah.
I like data, kind of nerdy, so
Yeah.
we'll talk about kind of some of the things that you'll see as we talk through the accountability system. So essentially, there's a website, it's supposed to be easy to remember, so it's txschools.gov, and you can plug in a district's name, you can plug in a campus name, and that's where you can see big picture. You can drill down into the data and see not necessarily by how individual students are doing, but subgroups, specific criteria, different things like that, because the accountability system covers a lot of things that we're going to talk about tonight. And so some of the screenshots that I'm going to share with you that are specific to East Central are from the texasschools.gov website. Okay. Keep myself moving here. All right. So back to, there has to be a system for determining whether or not we're being successful. That's what accountability is about, or accountability systems. And so the point of this slide is just to be able to say that where there are systems for that, students do better. So regardless of how you might feel about an accountability system, research shows schools do better in educating students because they don't want to be seen as not doing their job or underperforming. And students individually tend to do better in math. So the bolded statement there at the end indicates that students who went through the system where there was a strong system of accountability are more likely to attend and graduate from a four-year college, and by age 25 have higher earnings. So just people have studied, what it means to be in a system of accountability, both from a school perspective and a student perspective. So it does make sense. Okay. So why do you think, and again, no wrong answers here, why do you think we assess? Why is it important for us to even do that? Assess students.
You're talking about give them a test,
Why do we give them a test?
and we give them like a formative test
No.
or
Just why do
something,
we give them a test?
either, anything.
I would think just to see where they are, what they know, what we've taught them.
To help them get to where they need to be, because if you don't know where they're failing, you can't help them.
Right? Okay. So we have answers like that. I keep asking these questions like you don't have all the slides in front of you. So we assess to prime students for
I didn't do
learning, gather evidence of and reinforce student learning. As educators, we analyze the data in appropriate, efficient, and purposeful ways so that various stakeholders can act on that evidence to drive instructional improvements.
Didn't read it, I started to, and I looked up there, oh wait, I'm not supposed to read this.
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yes. I'll try not to say other things that you already have in front of you. Okay, so this is back to what's in statute. So in terms of what the legislators thought was most important in an accountability system, it's in law. But if you kind of read what the bolded words are saying there, the whole point is to continuously improve student performance. And so we need a system that can do that. They wanted a system that would eliminate achievement gaps between different types of groups of students. And then, remember I mentioned the theme of what happens after graduation. They wanted a system that would prepare students for post-secondary success. So in terms of what the legislatures have charged Texas Education Agency with and the commissioner with, it's create a system to do these things. So that being said, three things to kind of think about when you think about the system is you know, given what we've talked about in terms of, you know, what do we want it to do, you know, we want information to be available so that people know how we're doing, how well we're doing, where we need to do better. That's where the transparency piece comes in. So, you know, one of the key pillars here is that be transparent for the public. I was like, we're on the right side. Yes. Be transparent for the public. It needed to be fair for schools. So, you know, we have more than 1,000 districts in Texas. So when you think about the number of schools, you know, making sure that every school in the accountability system has the same opportunity, is evaluated in a fair way. That was another key piece, and that there's real rigor in the system. I think something we heard a lot before we had our current system was that it wasn't rigorous enough. And they would talk about different, you know, how rigorous is it if you only have to answer 20% of the questions right, you know, things like that. So how do we create a system that is rigorous and also evaluates what's actually happening in the classroom? Now I'll talk about some of what those changes have looked like over time. Okay, so in terms of how they approached designing the system, I know this is technical and more information than you would ever want to know, but it's essentially these 7 things. So first and foremost, everybody wanted a system where, again, fairness. So the system has been designed to have ratings that can be based on achievement, what I know, or, and that's an important, or progress. So we'll talk more about how that's done in the different domains when we get into it, but that's a key design element, is that you can be rated based on 2 different things, achievement or progress. Secondly, that there are multiple valid measures, not just one way that you're evaluated or assessed. The third one is that growth can also be measured in multiple ways. And we'll dig into that when we get to domain 2 here in a little bit. 4, that an A rating reflects performance consistent with reaching long-term student goals. So if you really are rated an A, it is highly likely that your students are going to be very successful. And there's a little chart to kind of explain what we mean when we say that. Successful post-secondary ways. 5, C reflects average performance for the baseline year. 6, ratings are based on defined criteria, not a fixed distribution. So every school if every school were performing well, they could all be A's. It's not that some have to be so many numbers of A's and so many numbers of B's. It's not a bell curve like some grading. And then the last piece, and this is a challenge, the system design has to be static, meaning no changes for a good number of years to be able to make year-over-year comparisons. We'll talk later about how many years that is. Right now it's 5. So it can't feel like it's always changing, and that's where we've gotten into some trouble in the last few years with how that was perceived. Okay. So we're only an hour in. I just want to make sure, is everybody comfortable continuing to move forward? Okay. Not gonna, so why refresh the A-Thrust system? So one of the things I just mentioned was a design element is it needs to be the same for a good number of years to be able to make year-over-year comparison. But why would you change the system potentially? Why refresh it? And so this is going to go back to what we just talked about a second ago, that's in law. We want to be able to improve student performance, we want to eliminate achievement gaps, and we want to prepare students for post-secondary success. So in order to do that, sometimes changes are going to need to be made. So the last time there was a refresh was school year 22-23, okay? And I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this. It's probably more important that you know how it was changed. So in order for us to do that, we're gonna have to dig into the domains, okay? So this is straight out of texasschools.gov. So if I go to that website and I plug in East Central ISD, the very first thing that I'm going to get when I get to the district site is overall accountability, okay? So I just did this last week. But it's reflecting 24-25 data. And so what you see on the left is back to sort of transparency of how we communicate information. Anybody visits the website, they can see that overall the district rating is a C, and it tells you how many points out of 100 the district received. If you look to the right, where it says change over time, then you can see the record of what that has looked like year after year. Now, if you see the kind of the gray box between 21-22 and then 21-22 what if, so the last time it was refreshed, what it's telling you there is the 21-22, that was the rating at the time. But if you applied the new system to that time period, then it's telling you what if that's the rating that you get there, so that you can get a better comparison from year to year, even though there was a system refresh. Okay? Any questions about this before we keep going? Okay. So how do we come up with a C? How do we get 72 out of 100 points? We're going to talk in more depth about each of these domains, but in terms of how they all work together, what you can see there is domain 1 is student achievement, domain 2 is school progress, and remember the design element is you get the better of the two, and so the better of achievement or progress is 70% of the rating. And then domain 3, closing the gaps, because that was another piece that was important to the legislatures, that's 30% of the overall rating. Still with me? Okay. We're going to dig into each of those in a little bit more detail. Okay, when we say student achievement, what do we mean? We are literally talking about being able to evaluate or assess what students know and are able to do. It's just, these are the things we taught this year, how much of it did they get? That's student achievement in a nutshell. And if I'm oversimplifying, please chime in. Okay. All right, so this next slide was super helpful to me to see, because we don't always think about this or talk about it this way. But you can score different levels within STAR. You've probably heard of things like master's grade level. But there's a correlation, back to how it was designed, there's a correlation between the different levels of achievement and how that predicts how students will do after they graduate. So students who score at the master's grade level have a 75% chance of passing freshman level college courses. So you guys have probably, so that's probably been a board conversation, right, about the number of students that you have at master's level right now. That's why that's so important, is it's a predictor of how they're going to do after they graduate. But notice it's not 100%. It's a 75% chance. So that's just telling you, without a lot of interventions or support or anything like that, that's their opportunity to be successful. The meets grade level, so they're going to have a higher likelihood of success. So it's 60% of a chance of passing freshman level courses, but they still might need some support, even at a meets grade level. Okay. When you get to approaches grade level, that's going to be a lot more intervention and support. And if you think about their ability to be successful in post-secondary world, that's even more challenging, and that's where we start to think about students who potentially have to take remedial courses, in 2 and 4 year institutions you have to pay for that. And so are they ready to walk in and take credit-bearing coursework upon graduation? If they're performing at an approaches level right now, that's gonna be harder to do. And then kind of the obvious one is that if they're not meeting grade level now, that's gonna be even harder. If they're able to do anything in terms of achieving university. So in terms of interventions and supports, even when you think about your meets grade level students, they still need a lot of that in order to be adequately prepared. So we don't always think about it or talk about it in that way when we talk about the different levels, I know most of us focus on, we just want to make sure they meet grade level. But meeting grade level still means you need some additional support to be able to be successful. Okay, so then how is domain 1 calculated? And that varies by school level, elementary versus secondary. So in elementary and middle school, they are the same in that all of their points are coming from star performance, okay? But when you look at high school, because remember, I keep talking about that, the legislation says post-secondary success. In high school, STAR is only 40%, and then you have 40% is based on the CCMR indicators, and 20% is the graduation rate. So that's how you get to just domain 1, depending on the different levels, okay?
You need to be college ready to be able to understand this.
I don't disagree.
I just,
College ready might not even be enough. Not a criticism, just stating fact.
Yes.
I have to say, I'm pretty familiar with accountability systems around the country. This is one of the more complicated ones that I've seen. And complication is intended to try to protect all students. That's the challenge, right? If you just measure it one way, you're only going to protect some of the students. But some of these domains are intended to recognize progress, growth, domain 2, because absolute values can be really hard. Like, what is the actual, where does a student, lie in the spectrum of meets and masters and so forth. So that can be really hard. So you put growth in there so you can give credit to people for doing good. And then you put a third piece in it, which is intended to protect kids who are historically lower achieving than other kids, whether special ed, whether racial categories or whatnot. So when you create a protection for all of these students, it gets more complicated. And that's the balance that states have to weigh when they do these. This one is more complicated, I would argue. Again, I've seen multiple states, but it protects students better than many states. So that's why I think, people, especially districts, have had trouble with this formula for other reasons too. And it's important to respect that, but at the same time, how do you drive the improvement for all kids, for special ed kids, for kids who have been historically left behind, for recognizing growth, because we want to reward positive movement. It's an interesting problem if you stop and think about it. This is actually my favorite slide of the whole deck.
This one? Domain 1?
Yeah, that one. Because it's all about how we're going to work to achieve more success, It's the machine for how you do that. So, anyway.
I am curious. Yeah, no wrong answers. But in terms of, elementary and middle school, it's just STAR. Then you get to high school and it looks distinctly different. What do you think about that? Does that make sense? Is that interesting to you? What?
Do you even know why? And again, I think a lot of people don't understand why you have one way of looking at the world for the elementary grades and middle school, which is really focused on academics only. And then for high school, it's a combination of academics and readiness for life, whether it's college, career, military, readiness for life. And so you're trying to measure something else that becomes more important in high school It's not as important to measure readiness when you're in the 4th grade, right? So just laying that on the table, does that sort of make sense to you?
And to me, it says you're teaching them how to learn while they're learning. And then when they get into high school, they're using all those skills to do the rest of the stuff.
That's very well said.
It is.
Very well said.
And I'd add that with respect to the long-range goals, we've realized the research is really clear in our own correlated data historically in the system that when kids are at least at grade level in terms of literacy and numeracy in 3rd grade, their trajectory is pretty predictable to the good through the rest of the system. If you can maintain that in 5th grade, you're setting kids up to be able to unlock advanced academics at the secondary. And when they can succeed in an advanced academic pathway in junior high, it comes with earning high school credit and those kinds of things in junior high. It unlocks a lot more options at the secondary level for more advanced placement, dual enrollment, more career technology pathways, all of which get us to the end, which is making sure that more students more of the time are graduating and are ready for what's next, and they're productive citizens and all those good things. So an accountability system that really ensures a laser focus on literacy, numeracy, academic outcomes through the elementary years really assures then that your system is going to unlock opportunities for advanced academics and employability in the secondary pathways. Kind of the way you put it is you're learning how to learn now, and once you're equipped, now you're ready to thrive as an advanced learner. Because remediation at the secondary level is really hard, and when you're remediating, kids aren't getting access to all the things they need to become productive citizens and have multiple options for continuing their learning and credential bearing beyond. So you almost got to, you have to get it done before they hit secondary school.
Thank you for saying it, we're gonna come back to
Yeah.
that. When we get to the goal setting part.
So the accountability system's kind of aligned with that. Is aligned with that.
Well, and two, all the things that we talked about at the start, the purpose of accountability and, the research showing that, where there are accountability systems, schools do a better job and students benefit from that. So, by the time you get to high school, let's not just look at what you know, but do you know how to do it also to demonstrate that in the different pathways and whatnot. Okay, so, that being said, let's talk domain 1, which is student achievement. So what we said earlier when we were defining was domain 1 is, what do they know and, what are they able to do?
Can I just add?
Yes.
Like a little statement about domain 1. I find this expression makes it easy for the community to understand. What you're trying to do is determine whether kids are at grade level. That's what you're trying to do. So if you're in the 5th grade, you're trying to ensure that kids are ready for the 5th grade, at the 5th grade, when they finish the 5th grade, right? And when they go on to the 6th grade, you want to make sure they're ready for the 6th grade. So the state goes through a whole lot of work to figure out what should kids know at the 5th grade. What are the things they should know? They should know their numbers, but multiplication, division, and even higher, mathematics. By the time you get to 7th grade, you should be at pre-algebra. You should be at algebra in 8th grade. And so you're trying to say, where are kids in that relationship? So if you've got set up for the 5th grade, and they're at the 3rd grade level, okay, well, that achievement is at the 3rd grade level, or achievement could be at the 7th grade level. So it's all about, in my mind, to make it simple, domain 1, achievement is about what grade level the child is at. Does that make sense? Did I? you know, when I was thinking about this years ago, when I was doing the work that Superintendent Touchdown was doing, and y'all are all doing, I wanted to know how many of my kids were below grade level. How many were below? Because that's where the problem is. That's where the challenge is. How do we get them to grade level? And it's a tough one. And that's why it's not the only measure, because kids come to school with a lot of difficulties or challenges or what have you. And you know that they're, in some cases, they're not going to be at grade level in the first grade. You hope early childhood will help, but if they're not, then you have to take action, and this is all designed to identify where they are at grade level, and then what action do you take on them. That's more than you ever wanted to hear about this. This is my favorite
We're just
topic.
getting started.
We're getting started, yeah. If y'all let me talk too much, I'll put you to sleep.
We're not gonna spend a ton of time on this, but just to reiterate, what you see for domain one, student achievement, it's formatted the same way that you saw for the overall rating, and then it tells you what the letter grade is, and all the way to the right, it looks at change over time. But now they've introduced what's in the middle there is school ratings by enrollment. So you see how many students are in schools that are at each of the different ratings, just for student achievement. Then you see little buttons, tell me more, dig into the data. On the website, you click on tell me more, it gives you a better description of what you're looking at. If you click on dig into the data, there's data behind these ratings that you can see on the website. You can also scroll down, and that's when you see what's on this next slide, which is then you can see just for domain one, and this is hard too, because you guys get data all the time from the district, probably in a variety of ways. But just so you know, on the website, you can also then see what performance details there are. So how many students are at each of the different levels. And what's really cool is you can also see for the state what that looks like. And then if you keep going, then you can even see domain one, the CCMR, and the grad rates. And so it's hard to read up there, but all the different indicators, again, you can see what that looks like for the district, and you can see what that looks like for the state. So CCMR is on the left, and the graduation rate details are on the right.
And CCMR and grad rate are lagging an extra year.
Yes. I'm gonna skip the discussion questions if that's okay. Just to keep us moving. So it being its progress. So domain two, as Paul mentioned, is school progress. So this is comparing how students are performing in two different ways. Growth, so compared to last year, how much did I grow this year? So like using Paul's example, where was I in proximity to where I'm supposed to be on grade level? Was I behind? Was I on track? And then have I made a year's worth of progress? Or how am I doing, how's my school doing relative to other schools and students who look just like me in terms of demographics, socioeconomic status, things like that. So that's what school progress is doing, is it's looking at two different things. So just to kind of point out, what's on the website right now for East Central, it's C, it shows you change over time. And I'll show you what this looks like, how it shakes out for growth versus relative performance. But back to this idea of there are two different ways that school progress is measured, and you get the better of the two. So kind of like back to the design elements, right? At the start I said, domain one versus two, you get the better of the two in terms of progress versus overall student achievement. And then even within the progress domain, you get the better of the two, either how much growth you made or how you did compared to other students that look just like you. And so then on the next slide, this is super nerdy, I'll just give you the headlines. So, the district let's talk about the district. The district gets credit if the students made growth, like, so they learned what they were supposed to learn over the course of the year. If they don't go backwards, if they at least stay the same, the district gets credit for that too, because that's important. That's what the first part of Part A is really telling you. And then if you look at the bottom where it talks about accelerated learning, the district gets bonus points if you didn't meet grade level expectations and you made progress. So in terms of how they're trying to create a fair system, they're trying to give credit where credit is due. If you didn't go backwards, you at least stayed the same. Oh, you got the growth that you needed, you made progress, or, whew, you made a lot of progress because you didn't even meet grade level expectation and you went up. So that's one way to do it. And then what you see on the right there is, like I said, the state takes all of the schools with students who look similar and compare performance of those schools. And that's another way that if you do better compared to others like you, they can't take the better of the two. If you did better in that versus growth, that's a way to be able to get domain 2. So what does it look like for East Central? So academic growth, the district's a D. Relative performance, the district's a C. And so you get the better of the two. So for domain 2, you guys are getting it based on relative performance. Does that make sense? And then, again, super nerdy, if you wanted to continue to look into the data more, it shows you specifically, what annual growth looked like compared to accelerated learning. And what you see on the right is one of those places where I clicked on the little button to dig into the data. So you can actually go in there, anybody can go in there and see what that looks like mathematically. Okay, so I'm gonna keep us moving. Skip the conversation, if that's okay, so that we can get to domain 3. So domain 3 is closing the gap. So like Paul mentioned, there are a number of groups who are historically underserved, and back to what the state said, or what the legislature said in terms of an accountability system. Not only do we want to make sure that everybody's prepared for post-secondary success, but we want to close achievement gaps. And so how do we do that? We have to actually look at specific groups of students and how they are doing to make sure that no one's falling through the cracks, nothing's being overshadowed or hidden by other students who are doing better, if that makes sense. This is where I think it gets complicated. This is where you think it's
I'm always like, domain 1, yes. Domain 2 even, I'm like, okay. And then domain 3, I think I get it.
okay. Let's talk about this one a little bit. It's when you see more words on the slides. So one thing to note on the right, it's reporting to you all the different student groups, some of which you might not automatically think of when you think of different groups that might be historically underrepresented. So everything from different groups based on race and ethnicity, the socioeconomic status, all the way down to whether or not students are in the foster care system, experiencing homelessness, part of the migrant population, things like that. Okay, so student groups are listed there on the right. And then the different categories are listed on the left. So not only are we looking at these individual students, but we're looking at their academic achievement, their growth, their graduation rate, progress to English language proficiency, and what is called the school quality or student success indicator. And so it tells you right there what that is. The SQSS, because we like our acronyms, are literally all subjects, all performance level for elementary and middle school, and for high school, the CCMR indicator. So again, to Laura's point, there's way more involved in domain 3, just in terms of making sure that all students are successful.
What are the 4 super groups?
Hold on a second. How that slide didn't print. Let's see.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, So I thought that slide printed.
I wasn't looking at it.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think so what's funny is I skipped it in the presentation,
Oh.
but I knew that it would print even if I skipped it, just in case somebody had that question. So that tells you the 4 super groups, and it also, because you'll see in a second when you look at the data, there's also this point around high focus. And so that's a definition of what is high focus. Because when you look at closing the gaps on the website, looks just like the other domains, but then when you dig in, you can see this on the next slide. This is just showing you, if you look at the different groups on the left and the different indicators across the top, then you can see what performance looks like for all those individual groups and indicators. Let's stop it in case there's any questions, because that is the accountability system in terms of the different domains and how they all work together. So to Paul's point, it is very complex syntaxes. Not that y'all didn't already know that. You ready to keep moving on? Welcome to me. I'm glad you're able to join us.
Apologies for being super.
No worries.
I'm not sure what happened.
Okay,
You want to take a break?
I was gonna say, it's 6:30, it's up to you if you need to take a minute or
Take
two.
a 5-minute break?
Up to you.
Good figure out a breaking.
It's up to you.
I'm fine to keep going, if everybody wants to keep going, it's up to y'all. Don't need to get up and stretch. I'm good.
Okay,
Michael?
all right. So what do we measure for accountability? So when we started the workshop this evening, we all shared individually different times we've held ourselves accountable, either personally or professionally, and what we did to be successful. So this, to kind of start our thinking around accountability, this is giving you an example of, where you might see accountability outside of education. One of which was fitness. So a couple of us talked about just different wellness goals that we had. Another one might be related to health. I didn't mention this one, but my blood sugar is much better when I monitor it. And then change my eating behaviors and practices to be able to influence it. And then the third one is also business. So if you think about it from a financial example or financial perspective, how do we monitor our budgets? How does that inform our purchasing practices, our investing practices, all those kinds of things? Those are just like 3 examples of places where we hold ourselves accountable and the practices that we do that successfully with and how that translates to education. So let's jump into, in education, the tool, one of the tools for accountability is STAR, okay? So, I mentioned earlier that the system gets a refresh every 5 years, okay? So the last time that occurred was 22-23, and what you see on this slide are some of the ways it was refreshed, and we'll talk a little bit more in greater detail about why that is. If you just want to kind of skim through those really quickly, that was the last time that the system was refreshed, and y'all have probably already heard about the next refresh that's coming, given that it's every 5 years. Okay. So, catch up. So one of the challenges is always, how are students tested and how well that equates to what they're experiencing in the classroom. And so in the last refresh, House Bill 3906 in particular challenged the agency to refresh to better align how I'm being tested on something, how I'm learning it in the classroom. And so what that looks like is, so for example, if effective classroom teachers are coherently building students' background knowledge and vocabulary in all subject areas, then on the test, part of the refresh was prioritizing cross-curricular passages in the reading and language arts questions that reference topics that students have learned about in other classes. That would be one example. But I'll give you guys a minute just to kind of read through the other examples so you get a sense of why those things changed and how that looks in the classroom. Any questions about any of these? Does it make sense? Have you heard any, I mean, if you have school-age children or grandchildren, or have you heard them talk about some of these things? I'm just curious. Go ahead. I think one of the ones that I've heard about from kids is related to the text-based responses. That was a big shift in 22, 23 for what they'll look like and how they're expected to respond.
Did they like it?
It better matches what they were doing in the classroom, is what I've heard some kids talk about. It is a way so that it's not just multiple choice, but a different way to be able to demonstrate what I know and what I can do. And then the last one, y'all probably heard of this or talked about this at the time, but the shift to online assessments, that was huge. And a challenge for many districts to be able to have all of their testing occur that way. Okay. The other thing that's important to know about STAR is a lot of people, including teachers, have an opportunity to engage in the refresh process. And so this slide is just listing what some of those are. There are advisory committees. Y'all have probably heard about questions that are being field tested. And so every test always includes some questions that we're just trying out to see if they're good questions before we make them count. During the test construction, educator range finding supports consistent grading of essays. So there's a lot of work that goes into how we grade anything that's not multiple choice, but how we calibrate and coordinate to make sure that every rater is rating similarly. And then just lots of opportunities for teacher input. So.
Can I ask, how so this educator advisory committee, how do you pick the committee?
That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. Do either of you guys? I know at one time, when I was a teacher, I wasn't nominated. The state just selected me to participate in the committee that helped write the test and review the test and things like that.
Yeah, there's a self-selection option. Of course, they have to be selected, but educators could opt in or submit interest in being part of a review committee, and then depending on what they need representation from in terms of subjects, grade levels, and regionally, then they'll assemble based on the interest they receive. They, the state, will assemble those advisory committees based on that. So most of the time, folks get selected if they're interested, and sometimes they don't. But most of the time, they get selected.
Have we ever had anybody?
We have. Yes, sir.
How do you field test a question?
How do you field test?
Yeah.
So that's what I meant by questions are included in this year's test, but not counted. So that there's data to be able to determine whether or not they're good questions. Yeah.
Do the students know they're not valid? It's just
When they're
hard.
taking the test?
No.
They're all mixed.
And so you don't want to not.
Yeah, no, they're all
Take it
mixed in.
serious.
Yes, yes. So, good questions though. It does take more than 2 years though to be able to determine, what changes need to be made.
Right.
And so back to, it gets refreshed every 5 years. I mean, just that process in and of itself is almost half the refresh window. So, okay, so now let's talk about, and this is kind of what Paul mentioned earlier, there are different types of assessments. And so what's important to note is the STAR test is a summative test, meaning it's once a year, at least right now. It's at the end of the year, and it's intended to evaluate whether or not students learned what they were supposed to learn at that grade level based on what the state says they're supposed to know. Okay? But there are different kinds of assessments, and we'll talk about what this looks like in East Central. But I love this, I like the visual element of this particular slide, in that if you look at the bottom part there, and what's above the line, if you think about at the start of the year, there should be some type of assessment to figure out, given that students just came back from the summer, and a lot of things, it's called the summer slide. A lot is lost in the summer, more than you would expect. But so you start the school year and you gotta figure out where students are at. So that's the diagnostic. And then at key points in the year, you want what is referred to as those interim assessments to be able to determine whether or not students are on track to know what they're supposed to know for the year by the end of the year. And so by the end of the year is the summative assessment. But we're teaching and learning every day. So if you look at the bottom, there have to be what are called formative assessments. So, you know, what happens between now and the first 9 weeks, we have to have a mechanism by which we can determine, you know, daily, weekly, by unit. It just depends on what that looks like. But so let's talk about what it looks like here.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
So we'll do beginning, middle, and end of the year diagnostic screening. And you guys have all heard those terms, map testing, for example. And then you've heard the term daily formative assessments. DFAs are exit tickets. So those happen daily and throughout the week. We'll administer common assessments. Groups of teachers in a similar subject or grade level will have check, little 2 or 3 week common assessments to check progress of the quality of the learning and the quality of the teaching, so they can make adjustments before the interim assessment. And the interim assessment, gives us an indication, and very different than the diagnostic assessment. So when Jonathan is reporting progress, sharing data, he might say, last month you might have recalled, and I know it's hard to recall all that he presents, but he might have said, hey, we were looking at interim assessment data. It looks a little different than the data we had up to this point. So we're triangulating or looking at it all holistically, and then making drawing some conclusions about what that means for our adjustments that we're going to make, all in anticipation of preparing for the summative assessments, which ultimately is the STAR test currently. So it's an entire continuum of assessments, all of which have a purpose. They're all a little bit of a different purpose, but together represents our comprehensive assessment system, really all intended to make sure, as we pointed out earlier, that we know where kids start, so we can plan for that initial instruction. We know the progress that they're making and what adjustments we need to make as instructors. And then we can test interim to check the progress they're making with respect to the state assessment, to see if that's transferring what we're learning. What we're determining is their learning progress. Is it going to translate or transfer onto the state assessment? And we can continue to make adjustments. And again, all along the way, reporting that progress to the board and community. And then we got a pretty good idea of how they're going to perform by the time we get to the summative assessment. And usually we're pretty close in our projections in the end, based on just the awareness we have because of that entire suite of assessment. And the goal is always to assess just enough. More is not better. So getting to that sweet spot where we're not really losing too much instructional time for assessment purposes, and really a nice balance of assessment for learning and an assessment of learning, because they serve both purposes. Some assessments can support learning. Some are just measures of to what degree have kids learned, right? So it's kind of complicated and complex, but it's intentional.
and only because I know other districts districts are thinking about this already? We don't have to talk about it, but we all started to have conversations about how the test might change.
We have internally, not as much with the board, but it is looking like they're gonna shift to, and y'all have actually heard about this, to shift to more through-year assessments. So instead of one summative assessment in the end, it'll be broken up into beginning, middle, and end-of-year assessments. So those logistics and rules are kind of being thought through. They've been testing or piloting some of this in the last couple of years as well with some districts. But it looks like that's one of the major shifts that's coming, is those assessments will be given early in the year, around midpoint of the year, and then at the end of the year, and then all of those assessments will count. But how they're going to count as part of the entire performance is still being kind of baked.
Who has input in that? 'Cause I know that's a big, what we hear from the community, from kids. The stress, the anxiety, all the things that, now we're saying, instead of just one, now we're gonna do three, right? And so, where,
Part of the thinking was,
3 smaller.
so that there's not so
Not
much
so much
emphasis on
stress,
this
yeah.
one, let's have 3 and break it into chunks.
Which also then means implications for us are,
Yes.
maybe we can curtail some of these other types of assessment, because part of why we do these things is to inform us along the way, to prepare for the summative. But if we're chunking and chewing that, now we can kind of align our assessment systems to that, and that can be more useful for informing instruction than it has been as a summative assessment only.
no doubt, no, and I understand, and I think it's, we're already doing it. What I'm saying is, and what I hear out
Oh,
there
yeah.
is, when you hear STAR test and you hear pass or fail, that's what we're already doing it. They don't really feel it.
Yeah.
They're not stressed about it because we're already doing it. But once you, I mean, that's just the talk out there, right? And I just want to make sure that we're being represented. That was the reason for my question. Who is representing? Is it just the state, and we just have? In other words, who's the voice? And is it somebody that knows public school, or is it just somebody that's getting to vote?
I mean, some of what we talked about when you came in was, just how do educators get to participate in the process and inform what's actually on the test
Yes,
and
ma'am.
things like that. But then back to design elements and overarching, what should it look like and where it's at in the legislative agenda. I
Right.
mean, many districts, depending on their stance, advocate also in different ways to be able to do that. I don't know what that looks like here, though.
Yeah, so that basically it goes back to advocacy at the Capitol, and
Gotcha.
our representatives, and hopefully we're at the table, all of us representing the perspective of our families, and that hopefully informs policy, because policy then drives the direction that the commissioner is given. And currently, our current version of all of this is reflective of the statutory obligation that the commissioner has to implement an accountability or assessment system that matches the legislation, right? So in order for that to be detailed, change policy.
Thank you.
Hey, Coach.
Hey, how you doing? How's everybody?
How you doing?
Well,
Okay. Hey, man, how you doing?
Coach, in your packet, we're on page 61, which is good.
She just answered 61.
We're at 61.
All right.
Roll along down that list.
yes. Okay.
Wait, that's not Coach. There's dinner over there if you want some too.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Dana might give us a break in a little bit.
If we can persevere through this one little section on the teaks, we can take a break. Okay. Yes. So this next section is Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or TEKS. So Paul mentioned earlier that, the state determines what every student should know and be able to do at each grade level. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the TEKS. I see a great slide, so I was like, Did I over anticipate or?
No.
Anyway, okay. So this slide is just supposed to be, you know, it's showing you all the different districts in the state on the map on the left. And it's asking the question, you know, why do you think it's important to have clear expectations across the state that describe what children deserve to know and be able to do? So why do you think it's important, when you look at that map with all these different districts, why do you think it's important to have clear expectations for every grade level?
Well, I think everybody needs to, I say everybody, needs to know what the goal is and how to get there, right? And then how do I know if I got there? It's
And
kind
it
of
shouldn't
what-
matter if you're in the valley or the panhandle, or if you're a big district or little district or whatever, it should be the same for everyone.
I have other feelings on, let's keep it.
Okay, but that's the gist behind.
I got you.
In Texas, there should be a clear set of expectations at every grade level for what everybody's supposed to know, be able to do, because we're all testing in the same system as well.
So I got the same thing. So, but that doesn't encompass private schools and others. It's, so,
It's, if you receive public funding, then part of the system. Although, does that change with vouchers? I don't
No,
recall.
they're not held to the same,
It didn't, okay. Did not change. Okay.
yeah, that's where my heart really comes from. Because we're saying that we should all know the goal and the
Correct.
standards, but not everybody has to meet those standards.
Correct.
And if we're talking about public monies,
I'm with you.
and that's where my heart really comes. So, okay.
But at least for the purposes of this training,
Yes, ma'am. I'm
how
gonna
do
hold
the
this.
TEKS correlate to the test?
Gotcha.
Let's talk about that. So, like Paul said, for every grade level, there's a, you can look them up, there's a clear set of what you're supposed to know and be able to do, okay? If you look at, what it says there, TEKS 5.3a, estimate to determine solutions to mathematical and real-world problems involving addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. What grade level do you think that is? And there's a clue there in how it's numbered.
Yeah, it says fifth grade.
Fifth grade.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're even numbered in such a way that when you see a TEK, you should know what grade level at least.
Okay.
Okay? So if that's the standard, how does it get tested? So this is just showing you an example of what the standard is. So it's a standard you just saw. And then what the actual STAR question is to be able to test that particular standard. You don't need to answer the STAR question. But if you look at the STAR question and you look at the standard, what do you notice about how they're aligned? Like what are things that you see in terms of the skills that you would need based on the standard, and how are they showing up in that question? I think the first thing I notice is, it says about how many,
Mhm.
which is estimating.
Right.
So I don't actually have to do math. I can estimate to be able to figure that out. It also says how many more miles. So, you know, there's gonna be a comparison there, and they're gonna they're gonna estimate it, and they're gonna subtract to be able to kind of figure out what the answer is. So that's just one example of how you'll see standards reflected in the questions, okay? And then overarching point here is expectations matter for all of these reasons. High expectations for students start with high expectations for leadership. When the decisions of district leadership are driven by the belief that all students can achieve at high levels, positive outcomes occur, and expectations need support to make them a reality. That would take a break. So how much of a break would you like? 10 minutes? 5 minutes?
That's fine. That's fine.
5? Okay. So it's about 6:50, so 6:55?
Sure. That was the program, coach. That was the program. Oh, man, they were trying to screen all the parents, ran the program real late.
Trying to get everybody in the door.
Well,
Screen,
yeah,
what you mean screen?
well, it was, I don't know the process, every parent had to get a wristband to be able to pick up their kid to take them home. And it messed up the whole thing. Well, you know, I'm not gonna throw them on the bus, but looked like he screwed up.
Got it.
Looked like they could have, that process could have.
Been done in advance.
Right.
At worst, if you gotta do it in advance.
Yeah, you got all the parents lined up outside, the program's supposed to start at 5:30, it just started at almost 6:30. I managed to get some mad parents.
You're gonna have a good day tomorrow, Mr. McKay.
Sounds like,
Mr. Harvey, who got the flu, he wasn't even there.
Yeah, he's sick for 3 days.
Yeah,
I'm
so
good.
that doesn't help.
Okay. Good to see how was your Thanksgiving and everything.
it was great, yours?
Good, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Did all family come over your house? Y'all-
No, I went over to one of his houses. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so we had a good time over there.
That's great.
That was good, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good food, get you some.
Yeah, we did.
Lots of food there.
How you doing?
Good, how about yourself, Coach? Yes, okay, it's fine.
And my hand got chopped just from walking around downtown. Oh, it's like, good Lord, Damon. Yes. It's just, it's always the right, it's never the left.
How are you?
I'm doing good, how are you, sir?
So you're trying to drink more water? I'm trying to drink more water also for that, because I don't wanna deal with that.
Everybody's good.
So is it a little tin? Yeah, that's cool. I didn't want to tear into the chicken while I was talking, but I could do a piece of candy.
There you go.
Don't go with it.
I didn't realize I had to switch to the break. It's actually not. It's like, let's take a break.
I'm glad you didn't make us answer that very first question just about exercise. I don't exercise at all.
I do have a tracker for that, but that's, I'm not doing well right now. I stopped tracking and I stopped it.
I just don't exercise. There's nothing to track. feet healthy and stuff. So there's this little white thing, see how much body fat you have and stuff, and he goes through the results. He says, and if you would increase your exercise, I said, wait a second. I don't exercise, so increasing means I would have to exercise. And he looks at me, so I don't exercise. I said, well, what do you do? I said, I work on the house, carry feed bag, but I don't go to the gym. I said, I haven't seen a gym in years. Actually, it's not something
I just want to be
I don't even do.
I can't do the gym thing
I
either.
do a lot of walking at work. I've been downstairs.
See, I used to be high school administrator, so built in.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Built in.
It's got to be walking to get something done.
Yes.
Boy, that chicken is good.
Good stuff.
Now you know for when you come back, Paul.
Huh?
Now you know for when you come back.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't get this in the French Quarter,
Yeah,
can you?
yeah. Man. Is this where it came from?
Yes.
Somebody at work today said, you know, I don't like San Antonio, but the food makes me want to stay.
I did.
You look very deep.
I want to take a food tour in San Antonio. I've done that everywhere I've visited. And somebody told me one time that one of the best ones they'd ever done was here, and I was
A
like,
food tour?
yeah, because I've never done a food tour here. So, okay. All right, so where are we at in terms of our agenda?
Right.
So, we made it through the 8th grade accountability system. We made it through STAR. Briefly talked about the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or TEKS. And so what we're gonna spend a good amount of time on next are what are the board practices then to support evaluating and improving student outcomes, okay? So you guys missed all the exciting stuff about A through F and STAR itself. Happy to recap
No.
if you wanna hang out later. Okay, so a huge piece of legislation, happened in 2019, and that was House Bill 3. And so it's really for the first time that the legislators came in and said there would be an expectation of school boards, in particular district leadership, to adopt student outcome goals, specifically in 3rd grade reading, 3rd grade math, and CCMR. What you see on this slide is what the requirements were. So you're supposed to have 5-year goals for each of those 3 things. That's what it's showing across the top. Like Mr. Toscano said earlier, when you look at the research for students' ability to be successful over the course of their K-12 career, if they are proficient in reading, in literacy and numeracy in 3rd grade, their trajectory is strong, stronger than if they are not. And it's really hard if they're not to catch them up over time and get them to a place to be successful. So if by 3rd grade they can do that, their opportunities increase exponentially. And so the thinking of the legislator at the time was, if boards are gonna focus on student outcomes, then they should focus in these 3 areas. So the 2 areas that are most likely to ensure kids can be successful, and obviously the 3rd one, back to the need for post-secondary success, the CCMR piece. So how are we doing? And then, remember we talked about the accountability system is supposed to support continuous improvement, post-secondary readiness, and closing the gaps. And so then, within those goals, you're supposed to be looking at individual student groups to make sure that everybody is being successful in meeting the goals. Okay? Okay. So let's talk briefly, and we won't do the quiz thing because you have the answers in front of you. But there are 3 types of goals. So the first is proficiency. And actually in the way that this printed out, you can kind of see, if you look at the 3 types of goals, and then you can also see an example of each of those. So if proficiency is, just what percentage of students reached or exceeded the threshold we set, you can see an example of that on the next page. And so next to the green button, an example of a proficiency goal would be the percentage of 3rd grade students who are at meets or master's grade level in reading on STAR will increase from 70% in August 2023 to 83% by August 2028. So that's just straight up proficiency. Growth goals, where do we expect students to be relative to where they started? The first one on the next page, and then it's an example of a growth goal. So the percentage of 3rd graders who were below meets grade level on STAR during the previous school year and who grew at least 1.5 grade levels through the course of the current school year will increase from 15% in August 2023 to 35% by June 2028. That's an example of a growth goal. And then the last one is a comparison goal. So what is either the proficiency or the growth of one group of students compared to another group of students? The example they're using here is the second one in red. The gap between average STAR ELA scale scores of all 3rd grade students who were at approaches grade level in the previous year and that of all 3rd grade students who were at meets grade level in the previous year will decrease from a 20-point gap to a 5-point gap. So even though the state says you have to have goals in these areas, you can have different types of goals, either growth, comparison, or proficiency, in whatever the goal is most applicable to the district. Does that make sense? Normally, we would have asked, what kind of goal is that? But you would already have the answers. So, any questions about the different types of goals? Okay. All right. So, this is probably more exciting on the screen than it is on the slides. And we're in Texas, so we have football. I like football. I love football. But I do think it's funny because we're in Texas and everybody thinks that about us. And so, of course, our metaphor we're going to use here is football. Okay, so let's pretend you're the owner of a major league football team. Okay. What is the outcome that you want?
To make money.
That's not what I thought anybody was going to say.
To win.
To win. To win a championship and to make money. Before the game even starts, what do we need to win the game?
Good effort, right there.
You have to have a good effort?
Right, and everybody on the same page, and knows exactly what the scouting report said.
Okay.
And so they got the scouting to let them know that.
And who's going to help us with that?
Right.
We need a coach, right?
Right. Well, yeah. Well, you need a coach, yeah. Was that a trick question?
I mean, but really, before you win the game, right? Like there's some things we're going to need to.
Well, you would need some players too,
We
wouldn't you?
need some players.
Right, okay. Good players.
Good players.
There we go.
Yes. Or a good training program.
Yeah, that
That
was
was
it.
the game too.
Rules of the
That
game.
helps.
Expectations. Okay.
We're late at football.
So those are examples of what we call inputs. And you see the definition there. So inputs are resources and activities invested in a particular program, process, or strategy. And they are things that you will know at the beginning of a cycle. So using the football metaphor before the game even begins. Okay. What do I know at halftime?
You lose it.
You know the score? You know whether or not you're on track to win?
Right, and you're not making any adjustments to win.
Mhm. Anything else y'all would add to that? Okay. So we call those outputs. So the result of a particular set of inputs, usually knowable in the midst of a cycle, like halftime, and it's a measure of the implementation of the program, process, or strategy. So now we'll know what adjustments we need to make in the second half.
There you go.
Yep. Okay. What do I know at the end of the game?
Yeah.
Well,
The outcome?
did you win, did you? What we worked on didn't work.
You know that too. So the outcomes,
If you lost.
well, no, I mean, it's the impact, that's what you just said, the impact of the program or strategy.
Yeah.
Usually, you know, at the end of the cycle, and it's a measure of the effect on the intended beneficiary. So, okay. So this is just recapping the different definitions, inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Let me catch up in my, okay. So, how do inputs, outputs, and outcomes apply to the school system? When you think about the definitions there, think about the football game, do you see how that applies to the school system? What do you think of? Like, what are inputs in the school system? Like, what do we know before the year even begins, or what do we need to know before the year even begins?
What we're teaching our students, what they're learning, where they're at.
So the expectations.
Our strategies to get there.
Yep. And we need to have good teachers,
We have to teach.
leaders.
Yes.
What about outputs? What do we know in the middle of the year?
What are, where we are with our students.
What changes we need to make, we have to figure that out.
Because we've had interim assessments, informative assessments, and we have data to support that. Okay? And then, where do you see outcomes when you think about the school year? And what do those look like?
Well, I actually do a post-test, I guess, and, to see, to measure exactly, what did the teachers do to prepare these kids, during the school year. I mean, and I would view that as an outcome, some type of post-test, and you can measure that to see whatever, the pre-test was or whatever the midterm was, did that help, or we need to go back to the board one, scratch over.
So what's the test at the end of the year? That's the outcome.
Yes.
Start.
Start, right.
So, okay. So when we think about outcomes, there are two different,
Yes, that's
I was just saying,
right.
don't look at that one, now you're looking ahead.
Oh.
I've seen all the letters on the side there.
Yeah, no, don't look at that. We're gonna play this game. So when you think about outcomes, there are two types, adult outcomes and student outcomes. So adult outcomes are a measure of school system results that are not student results. They are outcomes that are not student outcomes. And so examples here that they've given us are parent engagement, staff retention, things like that. When you think about student outcomes, and you guys talk about this all the time, so I know what you know these are, a measure of school system results that are student results rather than adult results. So things that are measurable of what students know or are able to do. So an example is like the end of year assessments. So without looking at the next page, which ones are adult outcomes versus student outcomes? New buildings, adult. Star results, student. Student performance in extracurricular activities. Okay. Balanced budget. Technology program. Kindergarten attendance.
Well, that's fine.
Adult. Yeah.
Fortunately.
It's adult.
Because they don't get a choice.
SAT, ACT results, students, detailed lesson plans, adult. Earned student industry-based certification. Student. Teacher incentive plans. And school board conferences.
Adult.
Okay, so adult. Thank you for not looking at the next page.
Some of us already did, before we were caught.
Well, I just looked at it, I saw that, it said ass on it, so that's what I saw.
Okay, I didn't even notice that. I need to like reorder them. Okay. So, student outcomes versus student outcome goals. So basically what this is gonna outline, but you already see it on the page, so I'll just put them all up there. You have to have a baseline, so you have to know where you're starting. You have to have a target, you have to know where you're going. You need to know specifically who the population is, who you're gonna be evaluating or assessing, and the deadline. So by when do you expect to get there? And those are SMART goals. So let's skip through, I'm gonna skip this slide, and I'm gonna take us to this one, just so we can talk about what the example looks like. So, even though it's already done there for you, we'll talk through it. So it says underline the population. So, who's the population here?
Third grade students whose score meets grade level or above.
Yes. It says draw a rectangle on baseline with month and year. So you can see what's the baseline? Where are they starting from?
45% in June.
Yep, 45% in June of 2022. And then it says draw a circle around the target. So what are they trying to get to?
64%.
64%. And when's their deadline? June 2027. And then how are they measuring? What's their measurement tool? What are they gonna look at to know? Star reading, right? Okay. So that's just an example of what a goal statement would look like with all the different components to make it SMART. Okay? So let's take a minute. The next slide has, is it fair to say the current board goals?
Sure.
Sure. This is what I got from Duncan when I said, hey, can you
Yeah.
send me the board goals? And the way he had given it to me, it also sort of put reading and math together.
Sure.
I broke them up.
Okay.
Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, that explains the
Okay.
7.
That's,
Yeah.
yes. Well, I broke them up because
Yes.
when you put reading and math together and you have different baselines
That's
and
right.
different targets for each, it's harder to
Yeah.
monitor.
No problem.
So you do have third grade reading and math, right? And then you added fifth grade reading and math. Can any of the trustees talk about what that conversation was at the time to add that as board goals?
Too far apart.
Yeah, it was a while back, but I think from my recollection, we were talking about the challenges in fifth grade. And so, moving that, kind of the disconnect in preparing for junior high. So I think that was the focus, if I remember.
And then you also had one specific to eighth grade algebra 1.
And
Are all students taking algebra 1 in eighth grade?
that's what,
Was that part of why it was added as a whole?
yes, ma'am, and because we're getting ahead of, like, instead of waiting for high schools, we'll prepare them prior to.
Okay.
It was that, and with regard to the college readiness indicators, we knew algebra was a gateway course to college. So mastery of that in our system further indicates our children are college ready and likely to succeed
Okay.
and not need to take remedial courses. So it was an attempt to do that before they got into high school.
Okay. And then y'all have the CCMR goal, that's number 7, but you also have number 6. Trustees, what do you think? What was the rationale for adding goal 6?
I think it was just in anticipation of their senior year, you know, having them prepared in 11th grade, you know, making sure where they were, if they were college ready by the 11th grade year, instead of trying to play catch up.
Yeah, so where you had time to pivot, they needed,
You needed
instead of
to.
waiting until their senior year when the clock is ticking fast. And my son is a senior, and I know he's like, man, Dad, it's moving quick, it's coming. Both did.
How many, were they the same kinds of goals the prior year?
I think we moved up.
They were the same kind of goals, but they changed the
Percentage.
The annual target
annual
probably
target.
changed.
So the original end goal was all kids, it would be 100%. And then they looked at it and determined that that was very aspirational, probably on the end, more on the continuum of unrealistic. So then they changed it to 80 and then adjusted some scores. But then year over year, noticed that we had made some progress in some areas that exceeded what we had expected. So they increased for this year in those areas, the goal.
It kind of jogged my memory too, and I was remembering setting that goal to where it could be obtainable, because we didn't want people to be, well, never mind, well, there's no way we could ever get that high
In this 1 year.
in this 1 year. Right? And then we said, well, man, we made some giant strides, so take the
And then in this particular one, we're already starting the year almost there. We need to stretch that one. So they, in goal setting, went through that exercise. Didn't change the goals, changed the
Do you already know the
progress measure.
targets for next year?
Yes. Camry should have sent that to you, by the way. Did you send that to me? Or Camry sent that
I don't
I
care.
didn't get it.
to you? Didn't get it?
It's
Yeah.
okay, it's okay.
So it has these broke out with reflecting these indicators for this year,
Okay,
and then each year over year to 2030.
Yes, 2030.
okay.
And it's on our website too, right?
Just
Well,
show
it
me
might have been
the-
updated on our website
Oh,
now. It
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
updated when you and I talked last.
okay. Okay, never mind, I know where it lives.
Now she know where it lives.
Yeah, she-
It just wasn't living there yet.
Yeah.
Its predecessor was.
Okay, all right, so knowing what you know about your board goals, now let's just talk through some best practices, okay? I'm gonna skip this slide for time purposes. So this, back to, you know, in a football game, why does the scoreboard matter? So the goals are all focused on end of year because they are summative and meant to be kind of like a football game at the end of the game, right? But we know lots of things happen along the way to inform what the outcome is. And so that's where the term goal progress measure comes from. The goal progress measure is intended to be the things that you should be measuring and monitoring that will tell you whether or not you're on track to meet the outcome, okay? Do y'all have goal progress measures also? Or is this an area of opportunity?
Maybe an area of opportunity. We report progress in real time monthly to the board and the public
So an example might-
towards the outcome goal. And those progress measures include other things.
Like,
Yeah, so they'll include student performance on the most recent, interim assessments. They'll show student attendance progress and its correlation to the academic progress.
Okay.
And it'll show seriousness behaviors and those trends because there's a direct correlation there. So we'll aggregate all of that and just use that to demonstrate what progress we are making towards achieving those goals, with an emphasis on whether we're on track, off track, and really reporting each month what adjustments have we made specifically at every single school, down to every individual grade level, to every specific subject. We have about a 20 to 30 minute conversation about that, at every board meeting so that with specificity in real time, I am reporting to the board a comprehensive, I mean, our staff, comprehensive look at the current state of our progress towards their goals, achieving the goals they've set forth for us. I don't know if that's what you're.
Yes.
And also have where we can dig deeper or dive deeper if we want to get into the nitty gritties of all the.
Okay.
the-
So let's talk kind of difference between goals and goal progress measures.
Okay.
So first, they both have to have those key pieces, the baseline, the target, the deadline, the population, okay? They should be aspirational, but not unachievable. They require adult behavior changes to be able to accomplish them, and they are influenceable by the superintendent. Both goals and goal progress measures. The way that they are different is that the board should own the goals. This is where we need to be in 5 years, and this is where we need to be every year leading up to the 5 years. But how you get there and how you measure that along the way is really owned by the superintendent. Okay? They should be the things that are predictive of whether or not you're gonna actually achieve the goals. I'm gonna say this because I didn't say it a second ago, but I know you have 5 to 7 goals. Research says 3 or up to 3 goals is really where you get the most bang for your buck in terms of focus and return on investment. So if you think about that from a board perspective, that's why House Bill 3 says have to have 3rd grade reading, 3rd grade math, and CCMR. Because if you are gonna have goals, it should be what are the quote unquote most important. Doesn't mean you can't have others, you just have to consider how many others, and what monitoring looks like. But so for goal progress measures, if every goal also has 3 goal progress measures, that's where it gets pretty big. But that's administration's responsibility to measure and monitor goal progress measures. Status of GPMs is updatable multiple times a year. So, House Bill 3 technically says the board only has to look at the goals annually, 1 time, but best practices 4 times a year. And so in order for you to know if you're on track, you should be looking at goal progress measures also multiple times a year. You said you do that monthly. It's not all of them monthly. Is it all of them monthly? Okay, let's talk. Let's just talk through kind of, you know, how others approach that too. I'm just gonna skip it. This is just kind of describing what should be in a monitoring report, but we could talk through what that looks like. Let me catch up. Oh good, they're side by side again. So if you look at what should be in a monitoring report to the board, first and foremost should be the student outcome goal and goal progress measure. So if you look at the example monitoring report, you know, where it puts the little ones, the first one is showing you the goal, and the second one is showing you the goal progress measure. One of the quote unquote predictive measures of whether or not you're on track to meet that. Number 2 is the current status of the student outcome goal and goal progress measure compared to previous annual and deadline targets. And so if you look at where the number 2 is, that's what that annual targets graph is showing you. What the targets were supposed to be, and then the little star is showing you where you are in relation to those. And then number 3, the superintendent's interpretation of performance. So number 3 there on the bottom is we are slightly off track because. That's where the superintendent and team would provide an explanation of on track, off track, with, why not. Another place that you might see it is up in the top right-hand corner, where it says overall progress. That's another indicator of whether or not we're on track. And then the last piece that should be included is number 4, the supporting information that describes needed next steps. Because one thing to know where you are in comparison to where you're trying to go, but then what are you going to adjust? What are you actually going to do between now and the next time you talk about it? And so that's where at the bottom it says the plan moving forward is. I'm not crazy about this format. It looks differently in different districts. I'll show you what one district does that I think looks really good. The other thing that you have here though is, remember we talked about for Hospital 3, you also have to know how individual student groups are doing. That's what the graph on the, or the chart on the right is showing you, where it says student group targets. And so you get to see red, yellow, green for each of the different groups, you know, whether or not you're on track. So I've seen lots of different districts do this different ways. You guys know Houston has a board of managers. They've just gone through Lone Star governance. And so this is distinctly different this year than it has been in previous years. But one of the things that I just appreciated was the way they laid this out in their annual, or their progress monitoring. I can get to the right. Okay, so what you see as a district example, District Houston, and we're gonna go through a couple different slides, and how they share. So first you see the goal at the top, and then you see the predictive measures, the goal progress measures underneath, and they use the red, yellow, green to determine whether or not they've been met, whether or not they're on track, off track, things like that. And then because they do this in a presentation style, there are additional slides with additional details. The second example, this one does a really good job of showing them, or reporting out publicly on where they are, where they're going in relation to their targets. And you see up in the top right, it shows, whether or not, very clearly whether or not they've met or have not met. And then the other thing that I like about this format, and you guys might do something similar, is they're very explicit in the key takeaway. Because a lot of times, in some of the boards that we've been working with over the last couple of years, we've heard boards say things like, it's not always clear whether or not they're on track or off track. And it's not always, and it feels like sometimes you get so much information that it's sort of hiding the ball. And you really don't know just that. So that's one reason I like key takeaway is it's just, what you're supposed to get out of it. You don't have to interpret. The next one is just an example in the top right-hand corner of how they did kind of the 2 points in time comparison of the met versus on track. And then the example after that is where they do that other piece, kind of the, what did we say we were gonna do, what adjustments are we gonna make? And so and that's kind of how they approach reporting out on each goal. And then, if you have the appetite, we'll go one more. And then they don't look at everything every time. So they have a board reporting calendar so that they only look at certain goals or goal progress measures at certain points in the year, depending on the metrics and the goal progress measures. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what I would say differs for us, and it's probably just because of the scale of Houston ISD versus ECISD. We report progress on every goal, but it does not necessarily mean we report hot spots, bright spots, patterns, relationships, key takeaways, if you will. And so we may not report every indicator for every single campus every time, but we do report every progress measure every time. It just depends on what we're seeing in the system and where our emphasis needs to be with respect to the schools in our system, grade levels, that sort of thing. And that's kind of how we're approaching it right now.
But when you think about the board goals,
Yeah.
the 5 to 7,
Yeah.
trustees, do you have a clear understanding every time of whether or not you're on track or off track in meeting those longer term goals?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we do signal on track or off track for every one of those indicators all the time. And they also have access to a signaling chart for those indicators for every single campus, every single indicator all the time. They have access to that in real time. So they had in their dashboard the ability to see that. But there's definitely some things to think about here in the way that their approach is in Houston. Like a lot of things about it, and definitely see a couple of opportunities to continue to find ways to draw some trajectory correlations and some year-to-year comparisons at points in time, last year to this year, right? I like that.
I like the little golden line, the
Mhm. And then one thing we definitely have an opportunity to do as we report to the board better is the student target groups and signaling some progress there and closing gaps, et cetera. So there's definitely some really, really good ideas here.
Well, and I'll be honest, before I found this year, examples we've used in the past, not a single one had all the things.
Yeah.
Because every district takes a different approach,
Sure.
and, you know, it just depends. Houston's the first one that I've seen the key takeaway.
Yeah, it's good.
Other times, sometimes I feel like, I've even called before and asked Paul or Laura, what is this presentation telling me? What is, because there's a lot of data sometimes, and it's just hard to interpret.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so. Let's, for time purposes. Okay, so if we go to, what does that say? 96? Are we up to 96? Yes.
On the board reporting calendar, I'm just tracking Shane to our PMOC. So we do have a reporting cadence, not all of which are those things, are all those things in that cadence reported to the board. But there is a cadence for when each of those things are reported to the board. This is in addition to it, different than what I've been
No, we
describing.
talked about that in the first
Yeah.
session, and that's good.
Yeah,
If you have things in addition to this as part of your calendar.
well, they're associated with this. They're not disassociated.
No, but, so one of, like TI might be something that you would report on outside of this, but it's definitely associated.
Well, it's the work we're doing in our strategy on a page that is going to be what we execute in the interest of establishing or achieving the student outcomes.
Right.
So it's also intended to report progress that we're making in that body of work. Anyway, I'm not saying
Oh, no, I'm just.
that's good or bad,
Yeah.
or that I want an evaluation. I'm just making sure that there's a connection for the board in this conversation. What I don't want is, holy shit, we don't look like Houston. We need to throw everything out.
No, no,
Which
no, no.
I'm saying, you're gonna screw our entire system up because everything's really tightly aligned in
No, when we get
signals.
to performance
Yeah.
management, which
Yeah.
is what you mentioned with PMOC, later in the conversation, we'll look at that calendar example we shared before that has some of what you see here and
There you go.
initiative level,
There you go. Okay.
managed instruction level.
Yep.
Because there are other pieces that are super important that you should also be monitoring.
Okay.
Okay. So again, kind of for time purposes, are you guys comfortable with me not going over some of the key elements of effective monitoring conversations? Can this be a resource?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I wanted us to get through what is sort of the official ISO training. So what you just completed is what you would do with Region 20 or any other person who comes in to do ISO training. And this training on AFREF accountability, STAR, TEAGS, all these things. As trustees, you're required to complete this training in 2 years. If you had all members present, you would also be able to get your team building credit in addition to the ISO credit. And something that we talked about before you got here was there's a lot of value in being able to do this together instead of individually trying to meet the requirement. And y'all actually 2 years ago did it together, and that's what put you on a trajectory where you're more focused on student outcomes and why you have the goals and the systems that you have now.
So Dana, if I understand, what we just went through will give them one kind of credit, but not two kinds of credit.
Correct.
So,
But people who are present get ISO credit.
right, ISO credit. So while you had to endure a lot of detail, I want to blame it a little bit on the TDA because that's what they
Yes.
require you to get. So that you're fully up to speed. So good, you got some credit for what you have to get as a city board.
You probably noticed there were a lot of turn and talk to your partner and things like that. We need to do that.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right, so how does this connect to the SGS work that we introduced to you when we first came to you a few months ago? Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the things that are part of the annual school planning cycle. So, do you guys remember seeing this?
Vaguely, but yes.
Okay. So, we talked before about there being a quote-unquote annual cycle, so all the steps that you see here should be completed every year. And they have little calendar icons with months to kind of demonstrate at what point in the year you should strive to be doing these things. So the very first step, when we introduced this idea last time, but you've since done this, is analyze school performance and community need. And the product of that is typically referred to as the quality seats analysis. So, just for terminology, so it's supposed to be a comprehensive set of data that demonstrates to you what's working in the district and what's not. So that then administration can make recommendations about adjustments that need to be made. Okay? It also should include community input so that you know what you're doing is meeting the needs of your community. Okay? I know the little icon for this next slide has summer on it, but my understanding is that in November, there was a presentation to the board of the quality seats analysis in the annual school plan. I think what Duncan said was, y'all, there was an initial looking at it in the summer just to see what you needed to change going into the school year. But typically, at this point in the year, whether you do it again or for the first time, this helps you then make strategic decisions going into next year. Does that ring a bell? Okay, some of the things that were covered in the quality seats analysis are listed here. You had academic outcomes. So I saw M-class data, MAP data, STAR data. I saw discipline data, talent data, enrollment and facility usage, and I saw some components of community engagement. Was it like a climate and culture study? Is that what it was? Okay. Did you guys ever see that? Well, I did. Okay. Some of the things that sort of stood out or were emphasized in that were the findings that are listed here. So it talked about declining performance persisting at 2 district campuses. It talks about an upcoming challenge related to CCMR given that Texas College Bridge is going away. And the enrollment piece I know is super important to y'all as a growing district in terms of what projections look like between now and 2030. Were there any other things that were super important that kind of stood out in all that data that y'all recall?
That's what I can recall. Anybody else?
No, my brain's shot right now,
I know. It's hard to do these at the end of the day. And it's a dense presentation of ISO.
And new statute prevented board meetings from happening during the school day. So if you recall, we did the 8-hour training throughout the day, started early in the morning. Our intent was to try and do these longer trainings at a time that would prevent this kind of thing, but statute that was recently passed prevented us from being able to do that. So we're stuck with 5 to 9.
Well, I'm curious,
Yes.
were there other things that were supposed to be key insights that were shared with QSA? Understanding that it's been a minute. Were there any other headlines, I guess? Okay, okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Landon also had information about the number of quality seats
Yes,
last year, prior to last year to this year.
yes.
I mean, that was an important headline that prompted the board to change the North Star goal. Because it's now much more aspirational than where we originally started
Right,
because of the progress made this past year.
right.
That was also.
And that's step two is when you, after you see the data, then you look at your goals and you first see where you are in relation to the goals that you set, and then you also can make decisions about whether or not you need to tweak anything
Yeah.
or make adjustments. And that's the North Star goal as well as student outcome goals we just talked about. What I am curious to know is, in terms of, because y'all are newer to this process, given that it's your second year in the network, do you have any feedback for the team about the quality seats analysis, the data that was shared, how it was shared, key insights, any of that kind of thing to help them improve for next time? Because this is something that should occur every year.
I think we're getting enough information as far as how that's going.
Yeah, and I like the fact that we can dig deeper if we want to, but, I don't know if anything different.
The planning that's going on, that's leading up into the quality seats analysis, and the goal of having the quality seats is coming along real well, I think.
Well, y'all did.
Yeah.
And you did in the fall.
Right.
So over time, it's gonna change every year.
Right.
Because we're gonna get better and better at what we look at and how we share that information and that kind of thing.
Yes.
But ideally, what you get in the QSA should kind of set you up to better understand then what recommendations are made in the annual school plan. So we'll talk about that, because you've done that too. So, okay, so we'll keep going. I want to, you just kind of touched on it, but just to reiterate, after you look at the data, that's also the next step is then to look at your goals, see where you are, and whether or not you need to tweak anything. So this was the North Star goal that we were just talking about. And so this is supposed to determine the number of A and B schools and or seats that you hope to see by 2030 and where you are in that process. So this was something that you probably also looked at in relation to the QSA, so that you have a sense again of when administration comes back with recommendations, how they fit into helping you achieve these goals along the way. And it's for the board. Are you on track to meet the North Star goal? Did you need to make any adjustments?
So, yes, we're on track, but we do have some, they made some adjustments, shared with us. I want to say yes, we're on track. I think that my members heard it, but that's why we lifted the goal, because we were gonna meet it too quick. Not, I should say too quick, it was just, and then they were telling us about the plateau,
Yes.
right? And so it would slow down.
Yeah.
I think
We want to keep the momentum going.
Yes. Okay. Did you also
back to the student outcome goals that originally were 100%.
Right.
And then you went goal to goal and kind of looked at the progress made for each. Of course, you saw that video. It was a pretty long work session with a lot of discourse around all of these and the
That was
board.
over at the student service center?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, so.
Yes, sir.
You watched that video?
That isn't good.
She did watch the video. She did.
That's right.
We still love each other, how about that?
I would also say, and when you did it in terms of timing, 100% okay. It's just important that you have a cycle and that the board has an expectation of, every year we look at all the data, every year we revisit our long-term goals, make adjustments if needed, that kind of thing.
And that's on that one slide that had the calendar.
Yes. So, so I'm gonna skip
Do we
that.
have, I guess, a question, we have I know we have a calendar, annual calendar, do we have those set as well, or is that something?
The goal setting.
That's what that is, goals, okay. Look at it.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
on.
Okay. All right. Just gonna skip ahead a little bit. So I shared this at the beginning, but a couple of you were not here, so just to reorient everyone, SGS is grounded in 4 essential actions. The first of which is set an hour struggle and to conduct an annual school planning process. That's what we've been talking about, that's where we are in time. And then the second piece is create, expand, and replicate high-quality, high-demand school options. So back to when you're looking at the data, and you're looking at your North Star goal, or you're looking at your student outcome goals, now you should be identifying the strategies needed to move towards those goals. Okay, so that is where the second one comes into play. So going back to the cycle, this is step 3. So step 3 is select appropriate school strategies. You usually want to do this by December. Okay? And we didn't talk about this last time. In December, TEA has a number of grant opportunities available to districts that they package all together so that by December, you can then choose which of those grant strategies best supports what you need to do to be able to achieve your goals. So that's why that's December. It could be later, but a lot of districts like to take advantage of the deadline, which is usually at November, and was last week. So just,
Probably already did.
yeah, so we'll talk through, so that's, well, before we do that, on that note, did you guys apply for anything?
We did.
Okay. Has that been a conversation? Was that part of the presentation?
We haven't workshopped that with the board.
Okay,
The timeline did not match our board meeting cadence.
okay, got it.
The
Okay.
deadline did
Okay.
not match.
So then let me just kind of talk conceptually and then plug it. All right. So you look at all the data.
Now, what we had talked about, we talked about innovative school models and the opening of an upcoming elementary school that we have not yet broke ground on.
Right.
It's potentially being an innovative model for School Action Fund. We talked about Legacy's ACE campus becoming a resource campus. Some of the things that are in our LASSO grant, we have
You previewed.
previewed. I just wanted to remind the board.
Okay. So to talk a
But we
little.
did submit our application on time by December, and met all the requirements, and did work with TEA to, make sure we were clear about what was the best pathway for us to take and region.
Well, in context for the board, prior, this is LASSO cycle 3?
It's
Four. Prior to this idea of LASSO, just so you know, grants got released all the time for different reasons all over the place. And it was really hard for districts, both in managing grants, but also in strategically aligning the right resources to the right strategies.
Yep.
And so the agency, in an attempt to better support districts, created a LASSO opportunity where they put related grants together so that districts could access the right resources and not just seek resources for the sake of resources, which a lot of times would make people feel like they're doing more work than they needed to in the early part. So that's where LASSO comes from. And this is the 4th year where we've had that opportunity every summer. And the intent is that you know these things before you start your budget planning cycle, which most districts start in January, February. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about when we talk about different strategies. So you see the pyramid here. Let's start at the bottom with universal actions. So when you look at all that data, administration might notice that there's something that needs to happen across all schools. They see a trend, and let's just use curriculum as an example. Maybe they want to adopt a new high quality instructional materials in reading. That would be every school. So that would be like that would be what we call a universal action, something that is system-wide. Maybe though, in looking at all the data, they notice that, what's an example here? Maybe there are, I've seen this before, maybe there's a school that has 40% of its teachers are brand new, have less than 3 years of experience. And the results are not good at that school, so maybe they identify that that's a school that needs to participate in a special kind of PD. That would be that could be an example of a targeted action. Another targeted action might even be, we've had the same leader at this school for 3 years, and we're not seeing the progress that we thought we'd see, so we're probably gonna change the principal. That would be a targeted action. When you think about the top of the pyramid, the intensive action, that would be whole school redesign, reconstitution, new principal, new teachers, everything, new model. That would be an intensive action.
So I'll give three examples. Obviously, the intensive action that will come to everybody's mind as she said that was the ACE turnaround at Lakes. A universal action and a targeted action with respect to our school calendar is going to be coming to you guys next week for the first look to get your feedback. But we'll have 2 calendars, options to look at, both of which add some instructional days to the calendar for next year. So that's potentially a universal action, that we add instructional days to the calendar for next year at every school. A targeted variation of that is, in addition to that, we may want to add an additional 6 days to legacy, which is a requirement to achieve resource status. Resource status, if you recall in our budget meeting in the executive session a couple weeks ago, generates a substantial amount of additional revenue in perpetuity for every student at Legacy. So there's several criteria to become a resource campus. One of those is you have to have a 185-day calendar. So Legacy, we're going to come with a couple of options for universal action, and then follow that up with targeted action with respect to Legacy and their school calendar after that. So just kind of bringing some real conversation to some real action here with respect to the different categories of school strategies here, targeted, intensive, universal. Is that helpful? Mm-hmm. And there's a little preview for next Tuesday's conversation around calendar.
Was there anything data-wise in the QSA that led to some of those decisions in particular, or another maybe example that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Yeah, so so financial position, in addition to correlation between the amount of time that we have kids in school and their learning outcomes, and the effect of summer programs. So our summer programs are continuing to evolve and refine and be very focused, but currently we don't generate ad seat revenue. So the additional 4 days will get us to a point where we generate the revenue. We'll run our same summer programs and unlock $300,000 to $500,000 to support programs we're already doing. That's what's caused that. in reflection of
Right.
the QSA. And then, of course, the intensive action was a reflection of what we discovered in the QSA that initially prompted the ACE, but now to sustain that, there is an opportunity to achieve resource designation, which unlocks, again, what could be as much as $2 million a year for legacy. Substantial, and it's in perpetuity, so it's no longer got an end date. So it's a substantial opportunity that we can qualify for, that we're pursuing. So, again, just add some local context to this learning and a preview for you guys as we bring that conversation forward on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yes. Well, and I have some other, we can talk through some other things that are East Central specific. The slide that has example annual school planning, for you as a resource, it's just giving you random examples of things that you might discover in your quality seats analysis. And then when we say an annual school plan, it's creating in a predictive way the things you're gonna do year over year to support that school. So how you're gonna differentiate support or intervention. But you guys are doing that, so let's talk about how you're doing that. So one of the ways districts do this, and this was y'all's approach also, is after you look at all the data, then you tier your schools. And so, this was part of the presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just to jog everybody's memory. So this is a slide from the presentation that you received that explained how East Central tiered the campuses. Does this ring a bell? Okay, cool. And this is district determined, so it looks different from here to San Antonio to Seguin or wherever, okay? The other thing that y'all did was you have weighted categories, and again, you determine how to prioritize those weights. And then the next one is an example of your actual schools and how they were tiered. So when administration is sharing this as part of an annual school planning presentation, it's so that you have a better understanding of, so we looked at the data, we tiered the schools to figure out who was most in need, and then that's how we differentiate different kinds of support. And so that's where this came into play. This was not a slide. This was, y'all have a spreadsheet that had not just what these interventions and support look like, but it also had individual schools and what the recommendations were for each school. Okay. And just so some of that was discussed in November, and then additional pieces like last one, whatnot, are coming soon. Okay.
So all of what you just described, just to kind of put it in non-EduSpeak terms, we have a disciplined, structured way to determine the level of need for each school that is considering a lot of information with respect to state accountability and all the goals that we're trying to achieve. Because we don't want to support every school the same way, we don't have enough resources, right? So we can then determine, depending on the tier, what is our menu of system supports that we're gonna invest in to ensure that that school can move from where it is to where it needs to be. So that's what tiering then unlocks for every campus. You'll even see in this tiered table, just as an update to show you how accurate it is, you'll see Cass Lee was highlighted in red with an asterisk because we were in the process of appealing their rating. Now we've gotten notice that that appeal was granted, and that's why this was an asterisk in the red, because we didn't tier it where we otherwise would have, because we knew that the appeal was probably going to be granted because that campus really wasn't performing where the accountability system initially indicated. So as we go through that exercise, we're able to deploy supports from the system to each campus with respect to where our targeted areas of opportunity are. That's right. So that's really what this is helping us do.
And you haven't worked for a district for a long time. You're probably wondering, well, is this what you've always done? It's not.
No.
And if you've been on the board for a minute, you might also remember that's not always how decisions are made. And so this is part of the work of SGS in supporting the district, in doing it in a systematic way and creating processes that can be sustained through leadership transitions and other things like that.
That's right.
In prior years, I'm not saying it looked like this year, but many decisions are made very subjectively, not objectively, not looking at all the data, not considering what individual schools need. This is a shift in how districts operate.
And taking it back to what we've been talking about all day, really, the importance of the board's focus on student outcomes allows all of this effort to just get really laser focused on student outcomes, and we're not spending a lot of capital trying to put this type of comprehensive, disciplined, targeted approach to all things operational as well. We know that operationally we have to be very efficient and effective so that we can focus here, but this work that the board's doing to focus on student outcomes signals to the organization that you better understand that in child nutrition you have to perform at such a high level of excellence that you are the standard in child nutrition so that you're supporting student outcomes, right? You see, so when you go back to the conversation at the beginning of the year when everybody was welcomed back, that's where that was going, right? Is that now we know everybody's work matters in service of this, because the board student outcomes is where their focus is, and that's our mission, right? So now we can take advantage of this support to structure everything we're doing in a way that is, again, sustainable, more reliable, and beginning to impact outcomes, as opposed to trying to do everything
Or
and do none
starting
of it
over every
deeply.
year. That's the other thing I would say
And
is
start over every year.
we've not always thought in beyond this year. And so when you have a plan for a school and you know what data you're looking at so that you can revisit the following year and tweak, that's very different from how things were done previously.
Yeah, getting back to tiering, you know, we had to give ourselves permission to say that there's a bunch of needs, right? But from a tactical standpoint or strategic standpoint, where are the lowest hanging fruit to get the greatest ROI this year, knowing that we've got a long range plan eventually to get to that 80% AP schools. Now we got permission to say, no, we're not going to neglect, right, everything to focus here, but now by tiering, we can take the limited resources we have and know that if we can move the needle substantially here, maybe a little bit incrementally here and sustain here, we know that that's substantial progress this year for our system. And then next year we build upon that, right? Like now we've got a more comprehensive plan that enables us to be okay with doing that. Because in the past, oh my God, there's a lot of holes in the fence. Like we gotta fix them all. And then we don't fix the system. Every year we're restarting, right?
The other thing that you would see in the past is all the resources went to what was on fire.
Or all the resources went to what was on
Do you have an
fire.
example of maybe how this has helped reallocate resources or support to schools that are doing well, but to be able to leverage or continue, or is there, we're not there yet.
Well, I will say this, the campuses that are doing really well feel that they can see clearly they're not getting the same level of system support, and they're also not satisfied with their A. It's a 94, we want 100. Okay, so there's that we're grappling with, is now everybody's unrelenting around where they currently are and want to continue to improve, but they can clearly see we're not investing in the same level of supports in them as we are.
And they
Others.
know what the tiering is.
They
What
absolutely
the support
are.
looks like.
I think to me, that what I noticed too is the competitive spirit, right? So I think that's something about that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
that's on Shane, and we're competitive first. So,
Okay,
All right.
you still good?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just, I'll do a quick, did we talk about this last time? I don't know. We did.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
it is my favorite slide.
Well, I'm not gonna talk about it at length, but it was demonstrating that you can take targeted intensive actions for different schools based on the data. So quote unquote, calling the right play, like
Yep.
the ACE campus, or like the schools that are A's or B's. If you have an A school that it's underutilized or under-enrolled, that might, a decision might be, let's increase capacity. Let's see what we can do to get more students to that school. Or the B school, let's incubate a future school leader at that school so that when they get a principalship, they're set up for success. Those are just some, on the opposite end of the spectrum.
That's right.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, your potential innovative school model for a new campus, where are your future leaders now so that they could be ready to go?
Got an A school that's incubating the replacement for that school, and the A principal is being incubated for the new innovative school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah. That's great. That's why it's,
Really,
yes, sir.
it's nice to be
Actually,
able to
5 years out. No, 5 years out.
to hear the universe of stakeholders.
Yes.
that's why this is my favorite slide, because I always like showing it's not just about the failing schools. And if you're putting leaders constantly at failing schools to help, you're not really learning what good, like best practices of running an organization.
Yeah.
So, great. I'm glad to hear.
This next slide, I left as a resource because we talked about it last time. In terms of the idea of managed instruction, everybody having a high quality curriculum, that's the first box. There being a very clear definition and understanding of what is effective teaching, whether it's the superintendent or the principal or another teacher who walks into a classroom, everybody has the same vision for what that is. And then making sure that there are adjustments being made based on data so that you keep moving towards achieving the goals. Sometimes the QSA reveals changes that need to be made system-wide. Did y'all have any of those this time? You talked about the calendar.
Well,
You've already adopted
they simplified our data dashboard, and they've done a lot of work there to make it so much more easy and accessible and valid for practitioners, instructional leadership teams and teachers. And then in terms of instructional leadership, our entire focus this year has been focused on effective
I know
instruction.
you voiced over for us last time what that looked like.
And so we're actually today, we spent a half a day with principals, this third consecutive month, it's for principals, academic facilitators, and deans. We're all the way down to model teaches and evaluating and calibrating around the effectiveness of that teach. And then reteaching it in a different way that actually met the standards, and identifying all of the bias and nuances that exist when we do this work, and how do we get really tight about not only what it is, but how do we observe it, and how do we respond to really focus support for teachers upskilling and not give them mixed messages and inconsistent messages. So, yeah, I mean, that QSA revealed both of those things as opportunities. And then, yeah, I can go on, but
Okay. Did y'all call it an annual school plan? Did you talk about it like an annual school plan when it was shared with the board? Or not necessarily?
I'm thinking of terminology, and are you talking about I'm trying to think, don't get me to use a different term. You may call it,
Did they
the
actually
superintendent playbook.
see the spreadsheet
Yeah,
or? I know I saw slides that had excerpts of the spreadsheet
Mhm.
for individual schools and,
Yeah, there's a game plan
okay,
for every single campus.
okay.
And Duncan and I talk about it, it's the superintendent's playbook.
Okay.
right? But it's the annual school plan to our team.
Trustees, do you recall what that presentation was? And the only reason I'm asking is back to in the spirit of continuous improvement. Is there anything that you would like to see differently? What was included, how it was included, how we talked about it? But the purpose is so that you understand the connection.
Timeframe, when did that, just timeframe, you don't have to give me all the details.
So we started the year with that annual plan.
Okay.
So part of the challenge is we're near one. It's a huge transformation for the board and for us as
Yeah.
staff. And, you know, when you sit for 4 hours and try to digest and connect all of this, it's overwhelming. And so part of it is balancing. How do we get into a sync of cadence with the board and staff such that all of these things are happening together versus our staff's doing a QSA, which they started actually last spring, and then we share it with you guys in November. And you guys got it in November, but we've executed it in August. But to share it with you guys in August as we're doing it is overwhelming for the board, but it's also only the second time we've done it as a staff, so I think it's gonna take a little bit of time, maybe by year 3 and 4, where all of these things are just happening with staff and the board simultaneously.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so it's not a desire to withhold that stuff from the board, as of course you guys know, we're straight up open book and we're really trying to push as much information out to the community transparently through the board. But it's also got to mean something. And I've been doing education for 30 years. You've been on the board too. I wouldn't want to expect you to be able to digest, interpret, and understand same things at the same time, at the same level, especially when some of this is a new way to do it.
Yes.
Right, so I don't know if that's even worth saying, but it's some of these questions make it feel like, well, you guys didn't get an annual school plan?
No.
Hang on.
That's why I was asking,
Yeah.
because I know that we get it, it's just sometimes trying to recall it too.
Correct.
But so one of the things that Paul mentioned last time, that we talked about was, one of the most important things that you can do is make policy
That's right.
sticks, that sustains key practices. So, if you leave, or when you leave, we should say,
Yeah,
there's an expectation of whomever's on the board that in hiring the next superintendent, a key practice of East Central ISD is to every year have a quality seats
That's right,
analysis
yes.
where we see all the data. Every year, there's an annual school plan,
that's right.
or if you want to rename it, whatever.
No, right on, right on.
But do you know what I mean, that there are some key practices that you know have helped you
Yeah, whether
be
I or any of
successful?
us are here, that
Yes.
lives on.
That's right,
Yes.
that's one
Yes.
of our, as a board, I
Yes.
can tell you, that's one of our goals. if you
And I
will.
will say, in our first year with this kind of training, we were only working with veteran districts, SGS veteran districts. And I could ask the same questions, and in some districts, they knew exactly what we're talking about and could tell you all about it. And in other places, it was unclear.
Yeah.
And so, part of the reason we have this training is to help you make connections and for the board to be able to understand and then reinforce and sustain what the team is doing.
So the annual school plan for everybody is just basically, once we've done all of this work, kind of similar to this document right here, it's what's the plan this year for every school. In this model, right, you've got Washington, we're gonna do a District 1 ACE restart. You got Adams, we're gonna close and reassign students to Monroe, right? You got Jefferson, we're gonna phase in a new school restart. Right? Of course, these are all pretty extreme, but we do have a plan for every school based on now that we've tiered and we've then deployed supports. Now, what's the plan for every one of these schools this year?
And I think just the learning curve for myself, I know is terminology and consistency.
And it's for us as well.
Right.
Yeah, we're trying to change some of our terminology to align it
Yeah.
to this terminology because it's less confusing and you can name anything you want, but why not be consistent with the SGS methodology? That's what we're shifting towards. So,
But you know, if I could say this, to try and make it as simple as possible, the whole idea behind the annual school planning, the quality seats now. The whole idea is get data, evaluate the data, and make decisions based on the data. That's it, you know? And that's what all this terminology is about. Because, let me try and really put a point to this, a sharp point to this. Oftentimes, schools struggle and very little action is taken. Why? Because it's difficult to make big changes when you change a principal or you change a whole school, right? It's difficult, it's unpopular, it's hard. And so the whole point of this conversation is to say, when you have a hard problem, you need to take action. And whether you call it a playbook or whether you call it an annual school planning process, what your annual school planning process or your playbook is about is taking an action to improve the outcome.
That's right. There you go.
Preferably one based on data.
Yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes we get lost in the terminology, and that's not the intent. The intent is, do you have a systematic way to evaluate data, interpret that data, make a plan based on that data,
And
implement, and then monitor progress along the way and iterate, right? And
Yes.
that there is an intentional, systematic way to do it that's codified in policy or administrative regs that it's gonna outlive all of us, right?
This is not an object, by the way. I pulled this up in case it was helpful to jog people's memory. This is when the team was sharing their annual school plans.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have one of these for every school.
And that was the.
And y'all have seen that, it's just.
No, it's not that. It's this, I think. Yeah, there's
Oh,
this that has every
we designed
school
it
and
presented
what's
it.
gonna
I
happen.
can't remember exactly when we did it.
Okay.
And let me just make an editorial comment. This district, in my opinion, is in the top tier of districts that are doing this work, okay? Not many districts take the amount of intentionality that this district is taking to evaluate and not many districts are taking the amount of hard decisions as this district is taking. But, and while it has not yet paid off as big as you want it to pay off, it takes time to make that happen. But I predict that you will improve significantly if you keep this up. I really do. And again, we have worked with a number of districts in Texas. And I could, but I'm not going to list them all and tell you where they stand in our experience with the level of intentionality. The hard part, y'all have executed a hard part, but the real hard part is to keep it going.
That's right.
That's the real hard part. And that's where I come back to the policy commentary I made last time, which is how do you put it in writing and say, this is the way we're gonna do things. And I will tell you, it's less important, the most important reason to do that is when you bring new board members on, they understand what the game plan is. They can go read it on a piece of paper. And this is the game plan, this is what's expected. And of course, you can make an effort to change these things if you think it's important. But this way you create what I like to refer to as the flywheel. And once the flywheel gets going, it's hard to stop it. And that's what you want. You want a good process that you can see and just keep going.
I would also say, and another of our pathways districts is thinking about this. and how you evaluate the superintendent and how you choose the next superintendent, also major responsibilities of the board, should be aligned to what you know works and whether or not you're achieving the outcomes.
Yep.
Okay.
And to that point, it's why we've been having that conversation around my school and its alignment to this. So they've had a first pass at what they're aspired for me to create to that end.
That's good.
Mhm.
And time.
And their intent is to evaluate me this year based upon
Yes.
that scorecard.
Awesome. So we
This board's pretty cool.
They are pretty cool.
Yeah.
We talked about
They're
this.
not playing.
No, they're not. We talked about this earlier. Let me put this back in slideshow mode. We talked about, we shared this last time. We heard you have a PMOC, which is a committee.
Yes.
But back to sort of what the cycle is. We decided to call these plays, we've put these supports in place. Now, how do we monitor whether or not it's working and make adjustments? And so that Houston calendar was just student outcomes.
Yeah.
This calendar has the student outcomes in the far right-hand column, but there are other things, like we're going to PMOC, that you should be monitoring to make sure that you're getting the return on investment that you intended. And so you have a calendar like this, right? That's what you were kind of
We do,
alluding to?
yes.
Yeah. So that's also not a practice we commonly see in boards. So if that's where you're at, you're ahead of me. So well done. Okay. Did anybody have a chance to look at the rubric for SGS implementation? If not, I can pull it up real fast. So there's a rubric that we shared with districts and SGS that tells them, or gives them the opportunity to self-assess what they're doing in comparison to, you know, what is fully implemented versus what is sustainable. And every quarter, the administration submits that to TEA, meets with them to talk about it. And so one of the things we said we wanted to share with boards this year through the pathway was, what does that look like every quarter? What I will say is, I'll pull it up in a second. Your year 2, it is highly unlikely that you would be fully implementing everything. You probably have a lot of things that are in progress. You might have some things that haven't even been started yet, and you'll see that. So what I'll do is we'll just take a quick glance. Big picture. We're just looking at colors. So red means pretty much we're not even working on that yet. Yellow means we started. Green means fully implemented, and blue means fully implemented in policy, sustainable, okay? So I'm just gonna look at some colors. Blue here is for the quality seats analysis, so that's pretty cool, blue. Blue is also for the annual school plan, so indicating that for the pieces we talked about tonight, you are further along than even districts who've been doing this for 5+ years. Places you're yellow, systems for managed instruction, most of the districts in the SGS network are just starting this work. What's another one? Teacher leadership pipeline, most districts in the network are still starting this work. Okay. Let me see where we have some other. Progress monitoring and intervention was yellow. Let's see.
On a green.
There's a lot of green. I can share with some of the green central office capacity, your green in quality authorizing, which is a topic we'll cover in the last workshop. Strategic resource allocation is yellow. And part of what the team does is they attach or link artifacts to demonstrate why they rated themselves certain colors. They also have implementation notes to explain why they gave themselves different ratings. But that's just to give you sort of overall kind of a sense of where the team is at in implementing SGS's key practices.
Yeah, so you'll see the
Oops, sorry.
notes on the right.
Yeah.
So when you, if you get if you didn't get a chance and you get a chance to look at this, and you want to understand kind of why the rating, that there's an artifact link there, but quick reference would be just the notes. It kind of explains why it's emerging or why it's fully implemented or institutionalized.
Well, it'll be really interesting, not that you're gonna do homework before the next workshop, but you could. So green is like school choice policies and practices. That's a workshop topic for the next time you come back together. And so that would be, it'd be interesting to see if you agree with
Yeah.
the team's assessment. So. Okay, any questions about the rubric or how we've rated ourselves? Okay, then let's talk about the board's self-assessment. Put it back in. Okay. So Camry and I coordinated. Okay, so let me kind of explain so we get the most out of this. What's printed is our results from last time when we took it for the first time. So those are the baseline results. So when you look at this slide, you see the updated here. Well, so when you see the printed version, it's all green for the second quarter because I hadn't updated it with the inputs that you gave us in the last 2 days. What you see on the screen is how it's changed since this week when you responded to the survey. Does that make sense? And I told her not to worry about having last time's results, that way you could compare what's on print versus what's in the slides. But we'll send out the electronic version of this, so you'll have the most current, okay? Basically, in the comparison to what you indicated this time, if it's green if it stayed the same or improved, and it's red if it went the other way. Okay, so this is big picture. Let's look at each one and kind of see where we had some areas where we can dig into some conversation. Okay, so vision and goals. Last time was 100%. This time's 100%. You guys are very strong in terms of vision and goals as a board and the indicators that are here. So if you're okay not talking about it, we'll keep going. That's a kudos to y'all. Another place where you have strong agreement is district strategic plan. So you can see where you were, and you are now 100% in all the indicators. Last time there was some conversation around the budget and its alignment with the strategic plan. Since then, people felt more strongly about the board's work in that area. Okay. Monitoring progress. Last time I think you had some yellow because we had some misunderstandings about how the rating was on the electronic form. This time we have no yellow, but we do have a couple of areas where folks said sometimes versus almost always and often. I don't know that we need to spend too much time on that, but basically it was, the first one there is ensuring quarterly reviews of progress toward achievement of district goals through systematic and timely and comprehensive reporting. We talked about that tonight, and everybody said you had a clear understanding of being on track, you do it every month. Was there something in particular folks were thinking about when they said sometimes? It might be somebody who wasn't here too. Okay,
Oh, everybody completed this?
one person did not.
Okay.
We had 6 responses.
Okay.
And it's anonymous,
Yeah, sure.
so, yeah.
If they're here, they would say, I did it. You remember last time, they're like, oh, I did that one.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and the other one was around
I did.
annually evaluating the superintendent, which you guys said you've been talking about and are getting ready for, so unless there's something that comes to mind, we can keep going. Okay. Transparency. So transparency is actually where I think there was the biggest difference in how folks responded of all of the pillars. And I might need to read to you what the actual indicators
So
are.
the printed one is last time? Okay.
And what's on the screen is
This
today-
time,
this
okay.
time. So transparency, where it's 50-50, half of the folks who responded said it's almost always and often versus sometimes. That indicator is ensures the vision and goals are developed with input from faculty, staff, parents, and taxpayers, and reports progress towards achievement prominently and consistently to the same groups. So I think there might have been some conversation last time about whether or not there was input. But there's also a big difference in last time versus this time too, in terms of sometimes.
So I'll say for my part, I remember doing that, I think I put a 4, not a 5 on there. But the reason why I didn't put a 5 was I think it was more ownership on myself when I was reading this, getting it out to the community.
Right.
It wasn't so much on that I'm not getting the
Okay.
information. I think it was more ownership on myself.
And so
And so I don't know,
even though there are public regular meetings of the board where you
Right.
are sharing this, do you see a greater responsibility to make sure that people who aren't tuned into the board meeting are aware? Okay.
that's kind of where I fall in.
Right.
And trying to, and I think we're making some headway, but actually, and I don't know that the community would even go to those, right? To a town hall, if you will. But
Was I supposed to fill this out?
No.
Oh, I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and I put almost always.
Oh, they were missing,
Myself.
okay.
So,
They were
for the
missing.
sake, I shouldn't answer, but I did feel like there's some opportunity to
I
almost
think
this
I
time.
changed mine also to a lower rating this time, just for the fact of the taxpayer thing.
Okay.
And I don't know how you would solve that though.
Well, so one of the things we talked about briefly last time was what does stakeholder engagement look like from the
Yeah.
board's perspective? And what is the board's role in that?
I mean, we try to do it, but.
Well, so
Yeah.
one of the things we want to do by the end of this year is have a plan for what that should look like.
Yeah.
So if this is an area that continually comes up, then it's worth developing a plan to do something about it. So that you can increase transparency.
More than that, we didn't get information, so I don't think the public.
Right.
Well, and the transparency is about the public
Yeah.
getting the information,
Yeah.
so, okay. It's an area of opportunity.
for sure.
The second one there was back to, so it ensures multiple forms of two-way communication between the district and stakeholder groups. So that's another area of opportunity. And then the last one is related to building collaborative relationships and partnerships. So, but of the 5 pillars, this was the one that had the greatest kind of disparity in terms of how people
Yeah.
answered. Especially after you see the first couple, they're 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
So, okay. The next one was accountable governance. And I think originally, the only reason we had yellow was, I think that was where we had a misunderstanding of which part of the scale they were answering with. However, this time, although it's blue, that is the indicator where there's, again, sort of, at least a couple of people who think that it's sometimes and not almost always or often, and that's moving forward as a single voice after a decision is made by the team. So I know next time you come, we're gonna talk through board operating procedures. Is that something that you wanna spend a little time on?
Sure. Yeah.
Just to make, that's one area that you might have disagreement about making a decision, but once a decision is made, you should have everyone, speaking as one.
And kind of what, I don't want to say trick question, but it kind of got me thinking, so we're pretty, I don't know that we've ever had, I should say never, but I know in my tenure, we haven't had any, but vote different per se, we've been all pretty much in alignment. I think we speak freely, and I'm speaking for myself, I feel like I can speak freely. I think, I don't know if maybe the question, because I had a little trouble with it too, because I know there's some times where you hear some discourse, but that's because we can.
Right.
But I think,
Well, so one way we could tackle that is when we're going through the board
yeah,
operating
well, we can
procedures,
actually
we
just
can
talk about.
build consensus about what that means, what it should look
Right.
like. And then we might see a difference in what this looks like the next time. Yeah. And then the last one is related to creating a sustainable future. That was 100%, it's still 100%, but we are gonna spend some time when we come back looking at what is in policy and are these practices reflected there and will they be sustainable? So, okay. We can skip the reflection if you would fill out the evaluation. Although I feel like the reflection is helpful. Do you mind, can we do a quick whip around of, based on everything you heard tonight, all the things that we talked about, does anybody have a wonder, a want, a worry, or a wish that you would like to share with your group? And if you don't, we can just do the evaluation. Okay,
Yep.
okay,
I
do
don't
the
have a
evaluation.
wonder, worry, or wish.
I don't have any worry and wants.
Well, I would like to ask this, it's given participation. And knowing that next time we're gonna be talking about policy and we're gonna be talking about board operating procedures, it's still an evening. Is there anything we need to do to just, make sure everybody's still available or commit to participation?
So my big thing was, is I had a situation at work that I planned on, I don't think it was me per se, I had plenty of notice. There was no, the district did their part, but just, sometimes.
Okay. But should we ask Kimberly just to maybe recirculate the dates for the spring, just to make sure those are still?
Oh, we can do that. We can have Camry just check with everybody. The dates have already been decided, but just
Right.
double check that they're gonna
But
work
there's
with
still
everybody.
good dates.
Yeah.
If there's still good dates for everyone,
Sounds good.
then we got a chance to massage them if we need to, but.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think we need to kind of coordinate the time of this workshop. I know last time we did it, in the morning, I know we got people still in the workforce, but I think, if we could kind of coordinate that, then they would get 100% participation.
You talking about like if we did it in the morning?
Well, like I said, in the morning, but you don't do nothing on Saturday, so.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we do Saturdays.
Well, that's what
an
I'm saying,
option.
maybe we can get, if we can do a Saturday.
I mean, I can have Camry poll everybody. I mean,
Yeah,
so we did pick these dates.
But you got people that still on the workforce, I'm not in the workforce, but.
Now during the work day, morning would work, but we cannot do it by law anymore.
Oh, okay.
That's the only reason we do
But
this one.
Oh,
But Saturday you can do it. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's take a look at,
We can talk, yeah.
Saturday.
Coach said, make sure you bring the tacos, right, Coach?
I mean, when we've done Saturday workshops, the energy is also different than trying to do it in the evening too.
Yeah,
So-
everybody likes.
All right, so the next 2 dates we'll have Camry just circulate a little poll to see, and we'll throw Saturday dates as an option and see.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we'll work
If
with
it don't
Dana,
work,
so-
we just kick it back to it.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's Saturday, don't
We
work.
can at least see if something works better.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure they know.
Okay, then if you wouldn't mind filling out our evaluation so we get feedback on how to do better, that'd be great.
Mr. Mulkey came in. I guess you can just check her out.
Yeah.
This is just a.
Yeah. Look for the name.
Can you explain that ISO credit? So
So every 2 years, whether you do it together or not, every trustee is required to complete what's called ISO training. It's evaluating and improving student outcomes. A lot of times folks do it through the service center, although y'all as a team did do it together 2 years ago. It's supposed to be 3 hours. And if you have a whole team of 8, you get 3 hours of ISO and you get 3 hours of team building. Because you have to have so many hours of team building every year also.
Thanks a lot for that.
So I feel like the state says, well, if you do this, because it's
Coach is
so
like, what about that
important.
7-hour training we did last time? I need team building for that. Right.
If we had the whole team.
Yeah, I got you,
it would-
I understand now.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
But any training that we do, outside of the ISO or team building, anytime we're together, you get credit for that. It's related to the framework for school board development requirements.
Okay, appreciate it.
And Cambridge keeps track of all that.
Thanks a lot, man. Dana, just thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Is the next, training is 4 hours, you said? The next two.
The next item on the agenda is item 6, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion from Mr. Gerhart. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Crosco. Mr. Gerhart, are you in favor?
Yes.
Yes,
Mr. Mulkey?
yes, yes.
Mr. Crosco?
Yes.
Ms. Brazil?
Yes.
Ms. Precious, yes. Meeting adjourned.